welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota, and I just wanted to touch on this before we start today's episode because many of you have been asking. My son was born. My son was born a couple of weeks ago on May 27th, and that has been the reason why I have been absent from the show for the past month or so. And I just wanted to inform everyone because a lot of people have been asking, and I really do appreciate the well wishes that my son is completely healthy. My wife is completely healthy. It was kind of a crazy delivery. My wife ended up needing an emergency C-section, so we ended up in the hospital a little bit longer. And then, my son was also in the NICU for a couple of days as well because he had a fever. But everything worked out well. The boy is healthy. The Zamota line lives on, and I really just couldn't be happier. So I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm back now. And Danny's obviously been doing a great job of holding down the fort, running interviews, doing some solo episodes. So, we really couldn't do this show without Danny. Now, for today's episode, we interviewed our friend Scott Horton. And we had a hell of an interview. We went on for about 2.5 hours, and really the crux of the conversation was really the culture war in the United States and also the Trump indictment, and what are the ramifications. We obviously touch on a lot of different topics over the next 2.5 hours. So I think you guys will be really entertained because Scott is just... I swear to God, Scott Horton is the easiest interview in the world because we don't really have to say anything. We just bring up a topic, and Scott will just carry the show for 2.5 hours. And this episode could have been 5 hours. And for those who may not know who Scott Horton is, he really is just one of the most prolific writers and prolific radio show host out there in terms of just not only geopolitics and foreign policy where his specialty lies, but just what's really going on in the world. So I think you guys are going to love this show. We did this interview via Skype, and Scott's audio is pristine. Our audio is kind of like in the background a little bit, but it sounds fine. We went over it. But just wanted to give you a heads up to warn those audio snobs. But really appreciate you bearing with us. And enjoy the interview. So, I guess today, email I sent you, I think I said Russiagate, Ukraine, NATO, why liberals are the worst people in the world.
Hey, whatever's on your mind,
casual casual conversation, whatever's on your mind. This thing is, so I've been out of the game for a while. So just, obviously I had my first kid, moved into a new house. So I haven't read really anything in the past month. So I've been relying on like very quick snippet YouTube videos for news. And I hate doing that because it's always, not the real context of what you ought to be reading. So I'm hoping that you can just help me catch up on news items per se, and I guess the big one right now. And well, first and foremost, let's just introduce everyone. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. We don't want to forget that. Danny Abdel-Jabbar is on the line. It's me, Henry Zamota. I am back from hiatus of having a baby and moving. Sorry, everyone. And we have a special guest, Philip Drew. Scott, the only thing I wanted to do with that is I wanted to show off my credibility of being a big time Scott Horton fan, because I know you used to go by that name back in the very old days.
That's right. Yeah, the show was called first it was The Way Shit Is, The Best I Can Tell with Colonel Edward Mandel House. And then I changed that when I switched to the interview show, which was 20 years ago this April. When I switched to the interview, it was the weekend interview show with Philip Drew, which was House's book. But I figured it was easier to say than Colonel Edward Mandel House, which no one knew what the hell I was talking about.
Well, I think I want to bring up Philip Drew anyway, because I eventually will probably segue into why everything is Woodrow Wilson's fault.
Oh, we should just start with that then, since you're already there.
Yeah, we can start with that, with the Espionage Act and all that stuff. But what, Philip Drew is the book that, or what was he, the benevolent dictator in the book that was written that, quote unquote, influenced him? Is that who that is?
Such a funny story. You know, right now in Austin, Texas, there's a skate park named after this guy, House Park. It's a public skate park right there at 12th and Lamar. And I've skated a few times, but I'm kind of an old man. But House Park is named for Colonel Edward Mandell House. And he was not a colonel. That was, for some reason, his honorary title. And he was an advisor to Texas Democrat governors, which they were all Democrats in those days. And the Democrats were right-wingers in those days. Anyway, so he was, you know, what you would call Woodrow Wilson's Cheney, if people are familiar with the role that Dick Cheney played in the George W. Bush administration, where he is really the power behind the throne and the guy with the background knowledge to tell the new neophyte president what to do in the following circumstances and that kind of thing. And he was essentially an agent of J.P. Morgan and their syndicate. So in 1910, he wrote this book, Philip Drew Administrator, A Story of Tomorrow, which is not a very well-written novel, but it's interesting to read. It's essentially his fantasy about, wouldn't it be great if America was a fascist dictatorship and I was in charge and I was able to make everything how it should be instead of the stupid, old, antiquated constitutional way? And so there's a couple of real kind of nuggets in there, man. There's one that I really like is, and this is actually in the story, it's the cause of the revolution, is that there is a senator, there are characters in there who are clear analogs to J.P. Morgan, or maybe to Rockefeller, and to say like Nelson Aldrich, or, you know, real powerful senators like that. I think it's a clear analog to Aldrich. Anyway, there's a senator in there named, the character's named Selwyn, I believe, and he is sort of the king. He's the real ruler of all D.C. He's the highest ranking guy who chooses everything. Everybody owes him. And he works for the big banker. And he calls in the governor of Colorado, whose name is Rockland. Get it? Colorado, Rockland. And he says, Governor, I'm going to make you president. And he says, well, that sounds great, you know, but, you know, I'll do whatever you say. You know, what do you want me to do? And he says, well, I need you to move to the right. You're too much of a progressive, and I need you to become more of a moderate. And he says, okay, well, sure, you know, I'll do whatever you say, Senator, but the governor does. He says, I'll do whatever you say, Senator, but of course, if I move to the right, then that's going to undermine my support from my base. And so what about that? And he goes, oh, don't worry. I'll have my conservatives attack you. Not enough to seriously harm you, but enough to reinforce your base and reinforce theirs and keep the script going. So he goes, oh, okay, cool. So that to me is already like a lesson in real politics right there. I love it. But then secondly, this is the scandal because they accidentally record it and the recording gets out. And so this proves, okay, I haven't read this book in 25 years. I'm pretty sure this is the scandal that gets recorded and gets out. And it causes, you know, this mass dissension that everybody can see how absolutely corrupt the constitutional system is. So Philip Drew leads the forces of righteousness in one big battle, and they defeat the U.S. Army. And he becomes the, as you said, so-called benevolent dictator of America, the administrator, and makes it punishable, a crime punishable by death for anyone to try to reinstate the old U.S. Constitution. And then it's essentially the purpose of the book is to say that, like, this is where we're at. This is the consensus of progressive politics in Washington, D.C. circa 2010. These are the things that we believe in. And so this is the doctrine of Philip Drew. And it includes progressive income taxation, central banking and inflation, massive government regulation of corporations, and including having government bureaucrats sit on corporate boards and this kind of thing. And it's essentially the wartime economy under Woodrow Wilson in World War I. And this is the guy who, as Wilson's advisor had secretly made the deal to get us in. Oh, and I think there's a big world war in there somewhere too. I forget. He builds a world navy at the end. There's a world government and a world navy by the end of the book. I forget. I think he has a big war in Europe too in the book. But anyway, House is the guy who as senior advisor without portfolio in the White House, had secretly made a deal with the British to get us into World War I in 1915, 2 years before they succeeded in doing it. And he's the one who helped shepherd the Federal Reserve Act through the House of Representatives. Now, for some reason or another, Wilson opposed the income tax, but that wasn't up to him anyway. That was the Congress and the states that did that, and the president had no authority on the constitutional amendment. So they got that. And then, but during World War I, they really institutionalized this fascist type wartime economy, the syndicalist type economy. And then there was a time when, Mussolini was popular when he took over, and this is much later, but when Mussolini took over in Europe, in Italy, he was kind of all the rage in intellectual circles at the New Republic and this kind of thing, as you might imagine, right? All the liberals love this guy who's, kind of rationalizing the economy, as they would put it, institutionalizing it all under the control of the state. And House was jealous. And House said, yeah, well, I anticipated Mussolini by several years. This is well known. And because that was his program, was the idea of federalism, separations of powers, checks and balances, the Bill of Rights, and private property. All of that was getting in the way of the good of the country. And the country should be led by wise and talented and brilliant and powerful men like J.P. Morgan, who know what they're doing and who, the government should be under their control. And then, of course, what do big businessmen want? They want a regimented economy. They don't want free market capitalism unless, some of them are ideologues, like the Kochs are ideological capitalists in a way that most, and I'm not on their payroll, by the way, I'm just saying that's a fact of theirs, that most, and they are Republicans, don't get me wrong, but most businessmen are simply a Republican or a Democrat and want to get on the dole and don't have a ideology of free markets, and these guys certainly didn't. And so this is, Rothbard writes in Left and Right, The Prospects for Liberty. He writes about this great book by Gabriel Kolko called The Triumph of Conservatism, a reinterpretation of American history 1900 through 1919, the progressive era. And he's basically saying that, and you could totally see this, man, and I know people get all caught up in left and right, but just forget your identity for a moment and just look at this from like a historical kind of perspective. This makes sense, okay? Progressivism is a right-wing plot. It's a corporatist right-wing plot against communists, against leftists and real revolutionaries who wanted to turn America into a communist country. And big business said, and in fact, I think this is even in Anthony Sutton, that J.P. Morgan said to Thomas W. Lamont Sr. in 1882, Lamont, you're in charge of this whole left-wing thing, which meant buy up all the labor unions, control their leaders, and keep them under our thumb, and we'll control both sides of all the arguments, and we'll prevent real communism, which thank God for that. I'm not arguing in favor of communism, but I'm just saying it makes a lot of sense that the progressives and the liberals, look, a lot of people are born sort of biased against extremely wealthy oligarchs, We're not going to all be right-wingers. So as long as you're going to have left-wingers, might as well buy up all their leadership. And this is the Colonel House program. This is the Philip Drew program, is you go ahead and bring in the labor unions. This is J.P. Morgan's guy. Bring in the labor unions. Put a government bureaucrat inside every labor union and put a labor union representative and a government bureaucrat on every board of directors. Now, that's not exactly how it all fleshed out in the end, but that was, this is essentially the idea here. So now here's the other point. Couple more. This is the basis of the New Deal. This is the whole New Deal. And, we know that FDR read the book, and I believe he was given it by his wife, and had been advised by Colonel House and the rest of this. And so even though House and Wilson had a falling out after Versailles and all of that, he was still around, where, Wilson had a stroke and died. I don't know how long after that, not too long. But House was still around by the time of FDR 20 years later, and had helped to inspire the New Deal. And again, you could see this as a concession from the corporate elite to move half a step to the left in their mind to stave off real revolution, which was not really, in the offing anyway. But then what they're really doing was, not losing, right? They weren't selling themselves out in doing so. They were just regimenting the economy in a way that benefited themselves. And so that means then if the liberal Democrats have been fascists ever since Woodrow Wilson, what the hell does that make the Republicans then? They've been the outright corporatist party the whole time without even pretending to give a shit about the working class or actual working, organized groups of working people in the form of unions or anything else. They're fascist too. And this is, look, these are all just categories and things. So don't anybody get all too upset. But, Robert Higgs calls the American system a participatory fascism. In other words, as I learned it in junior high school, it's a quasi-free market. That was the way they taught me the New Deal, was free market capitalism. It was so wild and excessive and bubble causing that it led to the crash of 29 and led to the Great Depression. That's what, if they teach this stuff at all in school, that's the official story. It was the wild excesses of the free markets that caused it. And so the lesson was, and we needed the New Deal to come and regiment the economy and put the government in charge of the economy to keep everything okay for the little guy, not just for the giant corporate elite. And that was their story, basically, even though, of course, the Federal Reserve had been created under the Wilson government 20 years before, and it had been the New York Fed's easy money policy beginning in 1927 that led to the bubble and then the crash of 29 and the onset of the Great Depression. But the point is that, by then, even when some of the New Deal was repealed with Truman, no more of it was repealed with Eisenhower. It's been added to ever since. And hell, I forgot. I had on the tip of my tongue I was going to wrap up that point, but I forget. But anyway, you could see the result is, a permanent state of war. And, the worst sort of corporations like the military-industrial complex and the banks that inflate the money. And not just tech, but tech that's all subsidized and biased in favor of enslaving us all. It all comes from this filthy system. And, I know what I was going to say, is, as they taught me in school, as a result of the Great Depression and all of that, we ended up with what they call a quasi-free market, a mixed economy. And that's, again, Higgs, participatory fascism. You could run for Congress, dude, right? But you're not going to make the economy free ever again. It's going to stay like this, and it's going to be regulators and it's going to be legislators working at the behest of business who make the biggest decisions for business.
Are you familiar with Paul Gottfried's work?
Yes, I haven't read all his books and stuff, but I know who you're talking about.
So he has a book called The Strange Death of Marxism. And basically, the argument he puts out is that we live in a post-Marxist world. Like Marxism as, we know it from the early 20th century no longer exists, and it was basically hijacked by, I guess, what you would call, quote unquote, and I really don't even like this term, but cultural Marxism. People from the Frankfurt School and things like that. And I don't like getting too into it because maybe there is something really to it, but a lot of the commentators who really focus on that don't really do a great job on the messaging part. In my opinion, I always hear cultural Marxism for everything. I guess Gottfried's argument really is pretty similar to that. It's there really isn't a Marxist or a labor union or a workers movement around the world anymore. It's all been essentially hijacked. by corporate, what a lot of right wingers like to say is the managerial class. You know what I mean? So that's essentially the argument that they put forward. But
I agree with that. And look, I think identity politics is a great smokescreen against economic politics. There was even a great article at salon.com by a liberal, not a progressive, not any kind of libertarian or right winger, or real leftist either, but just a liberal, about what, I don't know, say 2012 or 13 or something, right around there, saying, man, we ought to call this left-wing identity politics to a screeching halt right now, man. You can see right here the dead ends of all of this, that, at the end of the day, there are more right-wingers than any of us. So what the hell are we doing trying to reduce everything to this? But they were essentially falling for it, right? Like that person who wrote that, I believe it was a woman who wrote that, was essentially shouting at deaf ears because, and this is like a foreign policy radio host's lament, right? That all the stuff I cover is complicated. All the stuff that we really hate about the government, it's a mess. But identity politics is easy, dude. Trans women are women, or no, they're not, right? And you can just fight about that all day without having to even do any hard thinking at all. Did you hear what Susie said that Billy said about Sally? You could talk about that stuff all day without having to really know anything. And so you can see how just like on a lowest common denominator basis, where it's like fast food, compared to having to cook yourself a good meal. And so that kind of argument wins out over, all right, listen up, everybody. We have a real problem with the international bank and especially the American banking system and the incestuous relationship between our national government and our, especially Wall Street banks, but all the rest of them too, by way of this corrupt Federal Reserve cartel system that we have. And it causes our boom and bust, and it causes the rising prices on your shelves, and it's the reason why your dad's so stressed out, and it's the reason why your mom lost her job, and it's the reason why everything is going to hell. And I already lost you. And if I got your attention now, by the time I explain how that all actually happens, like, oh, well, for the boom bust cycle, let me turn you over to my friend Bob Murphy. And like, you got to really want to know. But regular people are going to not get it. I think Hazlitt said that, I don't know who said, I think it was Hazlitt that said that, inflation just wrecks people's lives in like some kind of natural disaster or something. But not 1 in 10,000 men understands what is happening to him. Mm-hmm. So you see, like, if you look at after the last major crash, I mean, who knows all the real statistics from the lockdowns or whatever from the most recent crash, which was kind of different. But if you look at like the crash of '08 and the aftermath of that, we just had this massive increase of suicides because people, they lose their job, they lose their ability to take care of their family, and they blame themselves. They must be losers. They worked hard and then it didn't work out, and what the hell, and then they give up. And the thing is, nobody's there to explain to them that, like, nah, man, this isn't because of you. There's this, George Bush conspired with Alan Greenspan to print a bunch of money to make all this imperialism and all this domestic imperialism seem free, which it ain't. And they got to print the money. And when you print the money, it leads to booms, and the booms lead to busts, and you are here, pal, but it's not your fault, Frank, so just hang on, And they don't hang on, they blow their fucking brains out. Sorry.
Do you know where the first shot of the new American Civil War is going to be? American Civil War II? It's going to be at a drag queen story hour. No, I'm serious. I think that is a more likely outcome. Is the first shot of the next American Civil War will be at a drag queen story hour.
There's enough of that to keep the media entertained. There's not enough of that really going on, I don't think.
Well, it's easier to get people mobilized on the right, by saying, hey, there's a tranny shoving his ass in front of a 6-year-old.
I think of it more like if we were ever going to have secession, it would be over real political and economic conflicts, and that's why we're not. It's because everybody's arguing about this stupid chicks with dicks garbage every single day, instead of talking about what we're supposed to talk about. In fact, I mentioned Murray Rothbard there. One of the first articles I read, I mentioned Left and Right, the Prospects for Liberty, which is brilliant, and I really hope people will look at that. But there's another one by him that's called Confessions of a Right-Wing Liberal. It's also from the 60s. And he's saying, I used to be a hardcore right-winger. Now I'm some kind of leftist. But what's funny is I'm still standing in one place. It's just the whole world's gone topsy-turvy, god dang it. So, this is a guy who grew up in the 30s and stuff. So here he is palling around with Maoists trying to stop the war in Vietnam. and whereas before he's like as hard right as you could get, but he's still the same. But he tells a story of how the right wing was not always a synonym for conservatism. These were kind of different things, and the conservatives were part of the right, but the right essentially meant everyone who hated FDR, everyone who was opposed to the New Deal and opposed to World War II. And so that did include a lot of crusty old conservatives, but included a lot of libertarian types and classical liberals and, businessmen of different descriptions and whatever.
America First was a loose coalition back in the 30s and 40s. They never called themselves the old right,
exactly.
From, Justin Raimondo and
right.
They were
and he
kind
says
of
that
like
too.
this loose.
And so but so after Pearl Harbor, then they all had to just shut the hell up for a while and have a giant war. And then by the time the war was over, most of them were gone. They had either retired or died, or and there weren't that many of them in the first place.
Conservative movement.
I'm sorry.
Been essentially silenced by the new right wing or the new conservative movement that arises in the 1950s.
Right. So that's William F. Buckley comes in and creates the National Review, and with CIA help, of course. And he purged all the isolationists. He purged all the anti-war guys and all of the anti-central banking guys, along with just all libertarians, Ayn Randians, John Birchers, and racists. They were all kind of purged from the official mainstream conservative movement by Buckley together. And don't let me lose this train of thought. Is there somewhere? So Rothbard is saying in Confessions of a Right-Wing Liberal, he's saying, essentially what made us the right is we all hated the bank and the war. And so then with Buckley, they were so invested in the Cold War, and they got rid of all the right. They replaced them with a bunch of neocons, a bunch of, right from the beginning, it was a bunch of ex-communists. And but they're Trotskyites mostly, and they're Americans, so they have a grudge against the Soviet Union. They're on the American side in the Cold War. And so in order to kind of finish off the old right-wing coalition of anti-interventionism, like even Robert Taft opposed NATO in Europe and that kind of thing. To kind of finish that off, they changed the subject to the culture war. And they said, oh, no, look, blacks and women and homos, they're coming this way. And so then the right-wingers of the 60s, which it was true that there was this new cultural left coming with the civil rights movement and the rest. But they deliberately focused on that and said, this is what matters. This and anti-communism, which meant support for the American empire instead of opposition to it. Because communism means the Kremlin, right? Not leftists here, not big government here, but the big government there. And Truman and William F. Buckley wrote in Commonweal magazine that we have to accept a totalitarian bureaucracy on our shores for the duration of the emergency, that is the Soviet Union, even with Truman at the reins of it all. And we have to accept that this is how it has to be. And so the culture war at that time, according to Rothbard, was essentially a PSYOP against the right, trying to change the subject. You can see the same kind of thing play out with the Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement after the economic crash of '08 and into 2009, because it was a good name for it, the 99% movement. It's too bad it was a bunch of stupid leftist hippies who weren't thinking nearly broadly enough at all when they named it that. They're like, look, if we want to really represent the 99%, we should shut up with our worst leftist stuff and say the thing that everyone can agree on, which is that anybody who gives a bailout to a banker gets hanged. We're not doing bailouts for bankers at all. If your bank is failing, your bank fails. It's like everybody else's business. Of course, the government's going to still bail out regular, FDIC, bank account holders. But you're going to bankruptcy court. All your assets are going to somebody else. Your bank doesn't get to exist anymore, just like everybody else. That's how the market has to work. And you could have got any person on the spectrum from all the way left to all the way right, excluding the billionaires themselves, but including all the millionaires, to agree to that. You could have been literally the 99%. The Tea Party and the Occupy movement combined, no bailouts for bankers. If you're going to bail out anybody, you're going to bail out some poor schmuck who's about to blow his brains out because he lost his job to your stupid boom bust cycle. I mean, you're not going to bail out a bunch of bankers. They want to throw themselves out of a, Manhattan skyscraper window. That's just fine with us. They can go ahead and do that. They should do that. And then so what they do? They go, oh no, look. Well, first of all, to the left, they said everything is about sex and everything is about race, everything is about white privilege, and everybody is a fascist, and all the Asians and blacks got to fight over affirmative action, and all the this and trans fucking whoever came up with trans is the most important thing of all. Like, what a brilliant psyop, because it's just such an outrageous assault on reason that, like, how many fingers am I holding up? 4 or 5, and you have to agree with the lie, and it just drives people crazy. And it's been like, what? It's been 6, am I exaggerating? It's been 6, 7 years of this. We got to talk about this every single day. And then people just absolutely hate each other's entire guts over it too. And it's like the Iraq War in terms of division,
To your earlier point, Scott, I mean, this is nothing new, right? The American public has been trained or programmed to engage in this kind of like very easy to digest civil discourse because, granted, people are mad or upset about something. Lots of people are. They might not understand what it is that is driving their ire, but now they can latch on to this small thing that they do understand or that they feel like they understand and that they can have an opinion about.
Sure.
I mean, most people are going to have an opinion on economic history like you do, right?
Yeah.
But they might have an opinion about, whether Black Lives Matter, as an example, right? And they're looking for the outlet. So like, how do you disengage people from that like raw meat, that low hanging fruit, and get them to talk about the important shit? Like, how could you have gotten that 99% movement to stop talking about left-wing stuff and start talking about the economic stuff that everyone can agree on?
Well, I mean, this is, I don't know how to make it work, but this is the responsibility of libertarians because we're the ones who are right about everything. So we're the ones who have to say to the Tea Party guys, dude, you guys are totally right. And those of you who are emphasizing spending and bailouts and taxes, you are so right to do that. And when it comes to abortion and the other cultural issues, just leave that stuff aside for now, because that's what makes this the Tea Party. This is an economic argument, and you're trying to make it as broad-based as you possibly can. What if a bunch of Occupy hippies showed up here? Are you going to fight them? Or are you going to say, yeah, let's all oppose bailouts together? They're here for economic reasons too. And do they understand property rights and whatever? No, but right wingers really don't either. You know what I mean? But it's for us. It's for us to lead both. I mean, we're the smallest group, but we're the libertarian leaning right wingers and the libertarian leaning left wingers are the smartest ones and are the best at understanding the priorities of what it is that we should be doing and working together on. And I really regret that we just didn't have anyone prominent enough to make the case when Black Lives Matter first broke out that, wait, stop. Don't name it that. Don't name it that. Name it accountability for killer cops. This issue affects everyone. And cops kill, obviously the numbers are skewed and whatever, but still, cops kill more white people every year than blacks or anyone else. And they kill people with impunity of all colors. And Just because a guy, they go, well, he had a gun. Yeah, but even then, sometimes the guy's just standing there. Sometimes it's the guy that called 911 and goes, oh, thank God the cops are here. And then the cop goes, oh my God, drop it, and blows him away.
Right.
And before the guy even realizes that the cop's freaking out about him at all. Why would you freak out about me? I'm the guy that called you. And then they're already dead. You know, I just saw this happen last week, or whether the video came out last week of one of these. The guy's standing, you know, right there. He's still on the phone. He's still on the phone with 911 when they kill him. But by making it Black Lives Matter, see, here's what sucked about it, right? Was what they're really trying to say was Black Lives Matter too. The idea being that you wouldn't just blow away a white guy, which is not true. They'll blow away anybody. Courts have ruled they all got a license to kill, and no one can ever hold them accountable for anything except in the absolute most egregious cases. They kill their own wife on a Saturday night off the clock or something like that. But on the clock, they can get away with anything. They just say furtive, waistband, and get away with it. So, but anyway, the point was they were saying Black Lives Matter too, but they don't want to say that because that sounds weak now and submissive in a way. Black Lives Matter too, like you're whining. And so you don't want to do that. So you go, Black Lives Matter. But now everyone who's not black, who's 85% of the population, hears, and I'm not saying they all hear this, but this is how so many people who aren't black heard it, was that, oh, Black Lives Matter, but other people's don't. So now you got this argument between all lives matter, including black people, and Black Lives Matter. And if you say that all lives matter, then you're diminishing our whole, and like, God damn it. Now you got
it turned into a semantic argument instead of an argument about the actual issue.
Exactly. So and people are so divided when you ought to be able to say to like your right-wing army, retired army father-in-law, they're like, hey, don't you think that the Bill of Rights really is the law? And don't you think that if a cop violates the Fourth Amendment and unreasonably seizes someone's life from them, that they should be held accountable for that? If a military policeman kills a army guy, there's a review there, isn't there? There's some accountability there, isn't there, Dad? Right? Like, why should it be? The most right-wing person in America, the most thin blue line person in America, sitting at the right kitchen table, ought to be able to agree, yes, accountability for killer cops. Look at Waco. Right-wingers care about Waco for some reason. Don't they know that was a drug raid, dude? That's where they got all that military equipment, was that the ATF lied and said that there was a drug lab in there. That was how the FBI got all their military equipment for that too. Right-wingers stick up for the Branch Davidians. Why? Because it was a gun control raid. But it was enhanced by the drug war the whole way through and leading to the deaths of all those people, 76 people. And we can say, well, there should be accountability for that. Well, what's so notable about Waco? Really, it's that there was a siege. It's that the good guys won on the first day, and then they refused to come out. So then it became this whole giant spectacle, and then, of course, all the deaths at the end. But there are SWAT raids like that all the time on civilian homes all the time. And, you know, I was thinking about this. I actually cut this out of a recent thing that I was working on because I just don't believe these numbers. I just can't. I've said this a few times out loud, and now I don't know, man. The ACLU says there are 50, and lately they say 60,000 SWAT raids a year in the country. That's 1,000 a week. And I started thinking, man, can that really be right? I don't know. It certainly must be in the tens of thousands. I don't know if
the police have to use all that military hardware that they've accumulated over the years. So
that's right.
I don't know if I agree with that exact number.
Yeah,
but
you gotta see what they count as a SWAT raid.
Yeah,
I think. True. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that means night raids in civilian homes, kicking in doors and screaming, "Get down!" and sticking their MP5s in some kid's face and, you know, hauling his dad away, like Afghanistan, like a special operations
sometimes going
raid.
into the wrong places too. That seems to be kind of prevalent these days.
So look, I mean, the Black Lives Matter people, they blew it Because what they should have said was accountability for killer cops. No matter what color you are, you got the right to not be killed by the government. If the courts have invented these layers of immunities that have amounted to full impunity for cops to kill people and get away with it, well, then God damn it, it's not supposed to be like that. This is the United States of America, dude. We were born free. It says in the Constitution, we allow the government to exist to be our security force. They're not our overlords. They don't own us. They're not a divine right, rulers by some ceremony from the Temple of Solomon's bullshit. They have no right to murder us. And when they do, they should be held accountable for it every time. And we ought to be able to get everybody to agree. And instead, no. Skin color, skin color, skin color. I remember it pissed me off, man. There was a Chris Rock special where he agreed. He starts off, I think it's like his first big joke of the special. And it's so thoughtless. Like, man, he had all this time. This is his Netflix special. It's his first big thing in a year and a half or two or whatever. And his first big joke is just cops should kill white people, white kids sometimes, make their mothers cry for a change. And it's like, you stupid piece of shit. That's not funny at all. And the cops kill white people all the time. And all you're saying is your first joke is you still don't know the first fucking thing about this issue at all. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do. What do they think? That cops are just going around killing black people because they're black? They're going around killing whenever they think they can kill. And when they think they can, black people make it easier a lot of times just because they're poor. Just because they got less juice. Or because there's more crime in poor black neighborhoods and more chances for them to be engaged with cops in the first place. But cops, the stories are endless. I mean, if you guys read the Free Thought Project, those guys keep track of this. But the cops, they kill people constantly, man. Constantly. They blow away a security guard. You see this over and over again. The security guard catches the bad guy. The cop pulls up, blows the security guard away in one moment. It's like, dude, what the fuck are you guys doing?
I hear that. I think, I agree with what you're saying fully. I think, this comes back to what I was saying earlier of, people only understand as much as they understand. And for specifically this case on Black Lives Matter, they don't understand the history or the statistics or a lot of the things that you're talking about, how cops are just killing people indiscriminately all the time, 1,000 raids a week, as you say, what they understand is their own lived experience. And I empathize with I understand why they would name it Black Lives Matter, even in spite of the rationality that you're putting up. But it's again, a product of this, programming that we get to focus on the simple raw meat, the easy shit that we can all, easily engage with and have an opinion about, even if it's totally way off base or missing context and nuance, because no one gives a shit about nuance, right? No one actually looks into it.
Hey, speaking of the cultural Marxists and all that, Frankfurt School and this and that, I actually read a piece by, it's that guy, Barbara Walters' son. I forgot his name. He's a helmet on Twitter. I hate him. He's a horrible liberal. But anyway, I read this piece by him where he was saying that all these people who are talking about Gramsci and whatever, all these cultural Marxist leaders, that you're really missing the boat here. That, he went around and talked to all the most influential woke leaders that he could find, like in the kind of wokest movement. And they're not reading that stuff. And he says, they cite it as footnotes in their college papers and whatever, kind of as checking boxes. But that's not really where they're getting this. And he names a handful, like a dozen contemporary black authors, led by Ta-Nehisi Coates from, I guess, The Atlantic magazine. And how these guys are all from, men and women, are all just from the last generation or two at the most, who have really advanced all this kind of wokest conflict theory, racial essentialism type thinking. And that, for whatever you make of it, like, it would make sense that them dirty commies are doing this to us, but it's really not. It's just, again, I chalk it up to, it's just easier. It's just easier to, I mean, what the hell? Black people are always black and white people are always white. And if all you got to do is point your finger and say that this is what we're fighting about, then hell, we could do that forever. You know what I mean? Trying to figure out, who has power and who is subject to it. And what those of us who are on the receiving end of all these decisions being made have in common and what we can do about that, that's all just much more complicated. But did you hear what Susie said about Sally's skin color and how that is the reason why she is so good or so bad or always must be in conflict with her neighbor? And it's just, I don't know how to undo it. Again, it is.
Do you know who wrote a book about this? Do you know who just wrote a book about this? Norman Finkelstein.
Oh, is that right?
Norman Finkelstein just wrote a book. I forget the title of it. I haven't read the book. I just listened to some of his interviews. And, man, that guy he's an old school, Marxist, labor
That's
Marxist.
Right. Yeah,
and
he
basically
sure
he does. And basically he does. And most people know him from his work on Israel-Palestine. But basically he wrote a book where he just takes all the arguments of like a lot of the new kind of identity politics. He calls them basically race hustlers, and basically he makes again the point that I guess we've been talking about, where this identity politics movement was really just a hustle to subvert labor movements, and he comes up with that conclusion. I would just listen if you don't have time to read the book. I haven't yet. I do want to read it. Listen to any interview online where he's talking to, the guys over at the Gray Zone, not Matt Taibbi, Aaron Matei and Max Blumenthal. Listen to the interview with them. It's really funny. And he's just like kind of, he's an old, like Brooklyn Jew from like Brighton Beach. So he's very funny. Just listen.
Yeah, he's got a great personality. A very prickly, like cold, unintentionally funny, I guess.
The best thing I've ever saw in my life was when he called out Alan Dershowitz for plagiarizing his book.
Oh yeah, he did. He ruined Dershowitz, which ruined him. In fact, it was Dershowitz
went after him.
Brought the entire power of the lobby against him and prevented him from getting tenure. Got him fired from his teaching position.
Alan Dershowitz, in his book, The Case for Israel, he plagiarized this book that was written in the 70s. I forget what it was called, but it was like one of those like real. Basically, he's a plagiarist, but it was also lazy writing. And Norman Finkelstein, I think his thesis was in grad school was tearing apart that book that he plagiarized. So he knew all the footnotes, and he was able to like, you just copied all the footnotes from this, like you didn't check it. So it was great. Like he absolutely embarrassed him. But I really do have a soft spot for those like old school labor Marxist. Like I'm a big fan of a lot of them. Like one of my favorite historians is Eric Hobsbawm, who's a Stalinist. Like you can't get much worse than that, but I think he's a great historian. Like you can't get much worse than a Stalinist who is unapologetic Stalinist. But
I don't know him, but
historian.
Look, I mean, at antiwar.com, we pal around with leftists all the time because they're anti-imperialists. And, people got so mad at us for the Libertarian Party doing that big protest at the Lincoln Memorial with a bunch of leftists and tried to act like we all got some commie cooties on us or something. But I'm going, Danny Sherson's a communist. We love him. You need to talk bad about Danny Sherson? Or Max Blumenthal, he's a leftist. I don't know if you'd call him a communist, but he's certainly a leftist. And, man, I love that guy, dude. Mm-hmm. He hadn't been bad on thing since, 2012. And even then, he fixed that mistake with gusto. He went from being bad on Syria to being one of the very best on it. And so made up for that small error. But, man, he's great on so many things. And the things that we disagree on, it's not like he's going around advocating for taking away all our property and all our guns and all our things. You know what I mean? He's advocating against all the very worst stuff that we also hate. And he's one of the first leftists to really turn against all the COVID regime stuff. He was like, look at all the fascism, and they want to put this tracking app on your phone, and this horrible, corrupt consortium of companies is going to make all this money on it and all this stuff. This is, again, lowercase, maybe even capital F fascism here, this public-private partnership to enslave us all, and railing against that. And more government control of any of the economy obviously ain't the solution, but at least what he's opposing is, absolutely worthwhile and worth respecting. And that goes for, frankly, like a lot of the best journalists in America are leftists. Like, what can you say?
They've been doing
look
the
at
heavy
Aaron
lifting
Mattei, for example.
They've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for a lot of the anti-war, journalism that's gone out over the past, really, forever. There are great libertarian journalists.
And conservatives, too. You look at the American Conservative Magazine for the last 20 years since Pat Buchanan founded it in opposition to Iraq War II. There's been a lot of great anti-war stuff at TAC, this whole time. So I don't want to undermine that. But, it's true. The core of the anti-war movement and the core of anti-war journalism in America is leftist. We rely on them entirely almost, Yeah,
especially, Aaron Mattei, I think, has been one of the most prolific journalists in the past, 5 years, 3 or 4 years, really since Russiagate started. And that was originally what I wanted to talk about, Russiagate. And let's segue into this, because bring it to more of a topical subject. What are your
get me started on Philip Drew, and an hour later, here we are.
Yeah, Philip Drew. Hey, I said let's take it wherever. Those are the best shows. We don't like to regiment things here. We like to just ask questions and see where they go. But I do want to really get your opinion on this. So I'll save mine for. Actually, I don't really have that much of opinion because I haven't read any of the indictment. Again, I started this off saying I haven't really read anything. I haven't read anything.
I've got notes on this topic, Henry.
So I'm just hearing it from YouTube clips, which is really not a way to digest news. Like, it's not, even read the New York Times. No, read the New York Times and just know that they hate you. But at the very least, read a paper so you can, you're not getting the full story when you're just getting kind of a clip, which a lot of people do. But I want to get your take on the Trump indictment. What's your opinion on it? I know that's a pretty wide open question, but.
Yeah, I guess I can come up with a few things to say here. First of all, what we're talking about is an offense, right? There is no crime here. There's no victim. Nobody's been hurt or defrauded or spies rolled up by the enemy or, any kind of thing. But I interviewed Judge Napolitano today.
Ooh.
And Judge Napolitano, I haven't read the indictment. I haven't had time. I've been so busy on other stuff. But Judge Knapp says, yeah, they pretty much got him dead to rights, man. And the thing is he's just so damn stubborn and obstinate that the judge says he had all of these opportunities to resolve this, and including as recently as just a few weeks ago, they made him an offer that's called a cure, which is sort of a plea bargain on a civilian case, I gather. Right. And he told them to go to hell. He lost his whole legal team, told him, man, you got to do the right thing here, here, and here. And he fired them all. Mm-hmm. And it's the sin of pride with that guy. And he's just a basket case. He always has been. And it's almost a practical joke on America from the gods that the one time we find a guy who's rich enough and tall enough and brash enough and angry enough, balls enough to somehow stop the Bushes and the Clintons and make himself the president. It's Donald goddamn Trump, dude. And he's just paper thin and an inch deep, and he doesn't know nothing. And he's a total narcissist, never reads, and he just cares only about himself. The only reason he's running for president again is so he can have revenge. And that's almost why I support him, because I want to see
Spite presidency.
I want to see him have the chance to take his revenge against the FBI and the CIA and those who wronged him, because they did. And I hate them, and I already did. And yeah, but still, like, I don't think for a minute he gives a damn about me or this country at all. He doesn't even know what that means, dude. The guy's such a fucking freak. And so look what he did here. He just dug himself a grave and threw himself in it head first. And now the judge explained here that, you know, and I don't know the law and all this, man, to be specific, but the judge was going, look, I know this guy. I've known him for 37 years. He just sent me a text the other day about how much he likes me. So, like, that's what the judge told me. He goes, but I got to tell you the truth, man. Like, what he had is national defense information, which is always illegal to have outside of official channels and grounds and securely compartmentalized facility and all of this stuff. He can't declassify it. It's not just top secret or secret. It's National Defense Information, NDI, and it's a crime to have it. You can't, a government official cannot take that. And he had it, and then they demanded it. He not only would he not give it to him, but then he came up with all these harebrained schemes about having, you should move it to your hotel room and hold it there for a day, and you get his bodyguard guy to take it out of a storage room one day, and then the FBI searches it, and then he puts all the stuff back, and it's all on camera, and then that guy of course flips on him once he's busted, and just all of this stupid crap. And then the judge, I asked him, and he went through 5 or 6 different steps where Trump could have just come clean and said, here, fine. And honestly, it doesn't seem like he had any other motive other than being able to say, hey, dude, check out this cool secret document that I have, to his friends from time to time.
I heard he showed it to Kid Rock, believe it or not.
I'm not certain about that, but honestly, I haven't read all the details of that. But I know that, Kid Rock said something about it. He was showing him something. But I thought that was still when he was the president in the anecdote. But I didn't read that very carefully. But it's just the dumbest damn thing. This is, felony stupidity, right? There's no crime here. He's just dug himself a grave, and they threw him all these lifelines, and he just refused to climb out of the thing. Bury me alive, I insist, he demands. And so they went for it. And now he's facing the rest of his life in the pen. And it's a federal indictment now. What are they going to do? Drop the charges because he's running for president again? Clearly not. They've decided to go ahead and indict him and pursue it now.
There was somebody a long time ago who ran for president from jail.
Yeah, Eugene Debs. He can.
Eugene Debs, yeah.
He was never removed. He was impeached twice, but he was never removed from office. If he'd been convicted by the Senate, he wouldn't be able to run again. But if he's convicted in a court, he can run again. Right. Not just from jail, but from prison, he can. Right. And look, to be clear here, I don't think anyone should go to jail for this kind of thing. I think all that stuff should be declassified. This is Woodrow Wilson's fascist espionage act from World War I, that he and Philip Drew came up with. And they use it against heroes all the time. And this should be a simple civil matter. If you're a government employee, you sign a thing that says you promise to keep these secrets or whatever, all other things being equal, maybe there should be some light penalty for this. But then also, too, we're talking about the former president of the United States. And so, I guess according to the judge, he was wrong to think he could declassify whatever he wanted. But still, so what, man? This is a guy who was president, who at least had every reason to believe that he could declassify anything he wants. And he's running for president again, and has been since the moment he lost the last election. And so it sure looks like, they got him, but also they've decided to get him. They've decided to pursue this and go after him in this way, which is hard to ignore as sure seeming to be pretty similar to what they've already done before, which is use the Justice Department in an extremely political way against him, and the thing is, you've always had that, J. Edgar Hoover style politicization of the secret police and all of that in D.C. It's been like that since the Wilson years again. But for them to do that against a major party candidate, as we learned we already knew, but especially is completely and totally confirmed by the Durham report, that the FBI absolutely knew that this whole Russiagate thing was BS before they ever launched the investigation. And long before it became public or was an official thing, long before they got their FISA warrants to surveil the Trump team still during the campaign there. They knew it was all a fraud. They were co-conspiring with the Democrats to frame the president by pretending to investigate a thing that they knew was totally a hoax. And then they kept that up for 3 years. I mean, in fact, it was funny. I lost a friend, a lifelong friend, because I made the joke that Trump should get a free term in office. He shouldn't even have to run for election again, dude. They stole his whole first term with him with his trumped up fake accusations of treason, framing him for treason. He should get a do-over, dude. You know what the hell? It's totally unfair. Can you imagine you become the president, they screw you that bad? Where, as they put it, I have the quote in my book, my new one I'm working on. He's like the captain of a ship with his hands on the wheel, but it's not connected to anything. Like he's Mohammed Morsi when the Muslim Brotherhood took over in Egypt, and Mohammed Morsi is nominally the president, but the government won't do what he says at all. They won't obey him at all.
So Scott, respectfully, I'd like to push back a little bit because I agree with the majority of what you're saying, truly. And I definitely think, over the years, I've definitely come around to the idea that Russiagate was definitely wrong in general, right? And I'm kind of seeing what you're saying about like him having a lot of like pressure, politicized pressure in the legal department throughout those years. But I still keep coming back to like you mentioned that there was no crime, and I think you're using that
no, there was no nothing. Right? The whole thing was fake, dude. You tell me which part of it you think was real.
On the indictment. I'm talking about the indictment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Russiagate. Go ahead.
Sure. What I'm saying is like for the indictment right now, you did yourself mention that it is always illegal to have this kind of documentation. Now, whether or not we agree with that, we can debate about that. But as it stands right now, that's truly a crime. And then the follow-up crimes would be the perjury, the lying, and the obstruction, so trying to cover it up, right?
Yeah.
And we can agree that those things are wrong, right? But I think what I want to push back on a little bit is that this idea that if he was wronged in the past, that somehow he gets a pass for everything that he does truly wrong in the future. And I think there's...
Oh, I didn't say that. I mean, what I was saying was from back when he was still the president, that as I said, I was just joking that he ought to get a free term because they framed him for Russiagate.
Well, I guess the way I was receiving some of what you were talking about in the indictment bit was that like, oh, this is a bunch of nothing burger. It's a victimless crime, as you put it, and I kind of agree, but at the same time, it's still a crime, right? Like literally.
Well, no, it's an offense, is what it is, and I would not prosecute it, and I think that look. And I'm no partisan of Donald Trump. I never have been any time in my life. I remember when he went bankrupt in the 90s, I laughed. I always hated him, man. I've never been a supporter of his. But the thing of it is that every president is above the law to the nth degree.
Like de facto, not de jure, right?
Well, yeah, whichever, yeah. None of them are touchable ever for anything. But this guy, even when he's the president of the United States, his own intelligence agencies and police agencies are willing to frame him for treason with Russia. It's a goddamn Kremlin. And they're willing to go after him for any chance. I mean, look at the Ukraine Gate thing, where Vindman and Chiaramella, they were put on the National Security Council by John Brennan for the obvious purpose of finding something, anything that they can use against Trump. This is the director of the CIA. Planted these guys in Trump's White House as, sleepers essentially against him. So what's happening now is clearly, again, it's totally felony stupidity on his part. And the judge was saying, look, they got him. I mean, he told his lawyer to tell another lawyer to go out there and say he'd given back all the documents when he hadn't. Anybody else does that, you go to jail. I mean, we're talking about Donald idiot clown Trump doing this. Like, I can see him doing that. On the other hand, though, for them to go after him when we're, again, talking about holding documents, not transferring them to any foreign power, not leaving them accidentally at the bus station or any kind of thing, having them at his house. when he is the formerly most persecuted by his own government sitting president in American history, other than maybe Jack Kennedy, and is currently running for president again. This seems to be an incredibly political choice to move forward with this prosecution.
Well, I mean, I wonder if it's political in the sense that they gave him like all those lifelines that he just totally blew up, right? They just,
I mean, that's a good point too. Look, there ain't nobody more guilty of self-sabotage than Donald Trump, maybe in this case. It is abject stupidity. He has absolutely nothing at stake. You're right. They gave him all these lifelines. He refused to take them because he's an idiot. You know, it's the same reason he's not the president. You know, as much as they probably, you know, they certainly did all kinds of things to, say, for example, influence Twitter to bias the election against him. The worst thing that worked against him in the election of 2020 was him telling people not to vote for him by mail. Because that'll give you the cooties. Because voting by mail is illegitimate and bad and wrong, because that was supposed to be the setup for somehow him making it all go away, which he was never going to be able to do. These state secretaries of state aren't in his chain of command. He could never stop any of it from happening. But step one of his plan was just demonize mail-in voting all the time. Instead of demanding that all of his people make sure that all their people vote by mail. Make sure your auntie and your grandma and your cousin Jimmy and everybody who's too busy working this coming Tuesday, make sure everybody's all registered by mail and voting. Maybe the Democrats would have still won by mail on the margin mostly, but the margin would have been much smaller. And in fact, like, he must have suppressed his own vote by 5% or more across the country. I mean, there's nothing dumber than that. In fact, he went to Florida, and DeSantis goes, "Stop saying that. We win in Florida by mail." And he goes, "Oh, I mean, not in Florida, but everywhere else." Well, but dude, even if you lose, don't you want to lose by the smallest percentage possible? Have as many total votes as you can? Get out the vote, you dumb ass. And this is, you know, who votes Republican? Rich old people. In the year 2020, the same people who don't want to leave the house to go vote. And he's telling them, if you're not man enough to go vote for me in person on election day, then screw you. Don't vote for me at all. Well, How to Lose an Election by Donald Trump, the blowhard bully idiot. You know? The guy's his own worst enemy. But no, the FBI is his worst enemy. And he's his second worst.
right.
You know? But I'd let him off for this. I think this is a bunch of crap. If you're going to indict him for this, then you got to indict Barack Obama and George Bush and Bill Clinton for murdering all those
agree.
people.
Let's do that. Let's actually also do that.
Yeah. And so, look, I mean, because people go, look, man, the president's not supposed to be above the law. And I'm like, yeah, I dig that. But why is this the first example of a former president ever being held accountable for anything?
Because he's the stupidest example of it, and it's easiest.
He's the one dumb enough to walk right into their trap. But it's not because because in America, we have a constitutional republic where there's rule of law, and that's how it works. If that's how it worked, Bill Clinton would be in prison right now. You know, this is a guy on Jeffrey Epstein's island. We know what he was doing there. They're not investigating that. They're not trying to find out what was going on there.
How many people have gone to jail for Jeffrey Epstein's investigation to date? It's like one.
Just his ex-old lady, you know.
Well,
himself, he was on house arrest.
He died.
You know,
he got suicided.
I mean, come on.
He was suicided.
Yeah.
It was a Mossad operation. I think everyone kind of knows that already at this point.
I think so. Look, John McCain's wife is on video. You can find it. Going, we all knew what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, but we were afraid to say anything. Well, why is that? Yeah, because they're all compromised by him. You know?
I mean, come on. It's like, how far do you really... You don't even have to really follow that rabbit hole that far down the loop to really come to that conclusion. Like, who was Robert Maxwell? Who was Ghislaine Maxwell's father?
Well, look, if people are really interested in that and they want a good take on that, check out Daryl Cooper, the podcast Martyr Made, and his great series on Epstein. It's pretty shocking stuff.
Yeah. It's crazy, but I don't know, something about Trump, man. You know, like, Trump supporters, they love him. It's their guy. You know, like, Trump supporters are kind of like third world rural folk who are, you know, supporting their local drug lord just because it's their guy. You know what I mean? They love that guy. my family's all Trump supporters. They love him. They love him.
I mean, go back to Raimondo. He was a libertarian. I mean, he was Rothbard's guy. He was a Ron Paul guy. But man, he wanted to believe in Trump so bad. Just because Trump, he's not one of us, but he's not one of them. You know, I learned this. I think this is important. I heard Al Sharpton say in 2015 that you people out there in the country don't understand this. So let me explain. Donald Trump's not from New York City. Donald Trump is from Queens. And that means that he has a severe inferiority complex when it comes to dealing with, you know, the WASPs of Manhattan, who he always wanted to be one of them, but he never will be. And they always look down on him, treat him like crap. He's poor white trash from the ghetto. When he's clearly not, his father's a rich guy. But compared to them, you know, with all of his uncouth manners and so forth, he always had this horrible class envy with the elite of New York City, and how this was always a huge motivation for him in that narcissistic overcompensation kind of a way. Did you guys ever hear the clip? This is true. This is not fake, dude. This is real. There's a clip of Donald Trump being interviewed on the afternoon of September 11th, and he's saying, you know, this means that my building is now the tallest building on the South Side.
I remember that.
Like, oh man, jeez, like, you know, like I could see how he couldn't help but think that, but god dang, how in the world did he say that out loud, dude? You know, that must have occurred to him, fair enough, but to boast about that, holy shit, you know. But that's just who he is, dude. He never was Ron Paul. He never was even Rand Paul, dude. He's Donald goddamn Trump for all that comes with that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And all it lacks.
What is the effort to put him through the ringer? Is it just, you think it's just because like he's an embarrassment to, you know, the people in power? Is it because they're really like scared of his policies? I think it's more so it's just like they're embarrassed of him. Like the face that he puts on in the presidency. They're physically repulsed by him. I think that kind of leads their initiative more than anything.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, like Sharpton was saying, I think that kind of class sort of treatment of him is part of it. I mean, look, the rules are to be the president of America, you got to be a governor, a senator, or vice president first. You got to go through, this was the whole thing with Hillary Clinton. It's her turn. You know, you have to be vetted completely and thoroughly all the way through the steps by the establishment. And Donald Trump got up there and skipped all of that. First time he ever ran for anything. And he straight up, like at the debate, was like, your husband's a rapist. He just buffaloed his way right in there.
He brought the accusers to the debate.
Yeah. And look, I mean, part of it too is Hillary Clinton, you know, and people really should read the Durham report. You know, when I read the Durham report, I had to take notes on the whole damn thing for my book, which all he did was say that I was right about everything, which was nice, but I had already figured it all out. It was already in my book. I just sprinkled the Durham notes on top of it, my Russiagate section. But Hillary Clinton framed the guy. She was the one. Her campaign hired a law firm, and they were the ones that came up with all this Russiagate stuff. They framed the whole damn thing. And, you know, once the FBI and CIA bought in on it and got in the program with them on it, then, like, you know, there was no turning it off, man. They essentially combined, you know, I guess compromised themselves, you know, wrapped themselves entirely up with her plot there. And so then, you know, attitude follows behavior. It's like, why are we framing this guy for high treason with the Kremlin? We must really hate him, you know, and they're now. And then, of course, remember, he goes, what is going on? This is like in Nazi Germany or something. And they were like, oh, remember that was when Charles Schumer said on the Maddow show, you don't go crossing the intelligence community in America. They got 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you if you cross them. So watch out. And the thing is, they started it, but he stupidly called them Nazis instead of like maybe having a meeting outside of camera view where he could like figure out how we can get along here, boys, or something. And remember his second day in office. I don't know whose idea this was. I used to know, but I forgot. Well, somebody's idea is second day in office after being sworn in on January 21st. He goes out to Langley or to, what's it called? McLean, Virginia. It's the CIA headquarters. And he goes and he stands in front of the wall of stars of all the fallen CIA heroes who died out there in the field. He doesn't even take off his trench coat. He's still wearing his trench coat. He looks like a character on The Sopranos or something. And instead of paying any respect to them at all, he goes, I had the biggest inaugural crowd ever, dude. You guys saw it. He talks about himself the whole time. And it's just, and you can see like the kind of unsettled, everybody's got their arms crossed and they're all kind of shifting their weight back and forth impatiently, listening to him talk. And they're just vendettas that are being written right then and there, that like, this guy did not know what to do.
He did it to himself.
He really is not good at.
Well, after they nab Trump, we can. I think we can move on to Hillary next, or Bush, or Clinton, or Obama. Anyone. Let's go.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting because clearly he's the front runner in the Republican primary.
Oh, by a million. He's way up.
And it's almost like this indictment is going to be like a giant campaign commercial for him.
Well,
like
that brings up an interesting question. Listen, remember, this is in the. Wait, do I still have it? I might have it here. Did I delete it? Oh, I deleted it. Damn it, I had it right here. The Pied Piper strategy. This was from the Podesta email leak. And they talked about what they wanted to do was get their media friends. Podesta was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman in 2016. And the plan was, we want to get all our media friends to boost Donald Trump and I forgot Ben Carson and I forgot Ted Cruz maybe. As these guys are the most radical right-wing Republicans. So we'll boost them, and because they'll be, any one of them, especially Trump, would be easiest to beat in the general. Because that is the rule of thumb. That's like the conventional wisdom is you run to the right or to the left in the primaries, and then you run to the center in the general to get those swing voters, right? Since Trump is the winger, then if we give it to him, then he'll be the easiest for Hillary to beat in the fall. But the problem with that is that people hate Hillary Clinton's guts, dude.
Right.
And they did not want her. And Trump was essentially famous enough. I mean, he's probably the most famous guy in the world, really. He was famous enough and rich enough and brash enough to get it done. So here's his. Our hope is that the goal of a potential HRC campaign and the DNC would be one and the same, to make whomever the Republicans nominate unpalatable to a majority of the electorate. We've outlined 3 strategies to obtain our goal. Force all Republican candidates to lock themselves into extreme conservative positions that will hurt them in the general. Undermine any credibility or trust in Republican presidential candidates have to make inroads to our coalition of independents, and muddy the waters on any potential attack lodged against HRC. Operationalizing the strategy. Pied Piper candidates. There are 2 ways to approach the strategies mentioned above. The first is to use the field as a whole to inflict damage on itself, similar to what happened to Mitt Romney in 2012. The variety of candidates is a positive here, and many of the lesser knowns can serve as a cudgel to move the more established candidates further to the right. In this scenario, we don't want to marginalize the more extreme candidates, but make them more Pied Piper candidates who actually represent the mainstream of the Republican Party. Pied Piper candidates include, but aren't limited to, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, and Ben Carson. We need to be elevating the Pied Piper candidates so they are the leaders of the pack and tell the press to take them seriously. So this is why, remember in the fall of 15 and the early part of winter of 2016, CNN would show an empty podium with the name Trump on it for an hour, waiting for him to show up and give a speech. But meanwhile, they wouldn't give coverage to any of his competition. Bernie Sanders would be holding a rally with 3,000 people, and they wouldn't show that. And then remember how obvious it was that the moment he got the nomination, they turned on him. And now, oh, we hate him. Oh, he's so uncouth. Oh, he hurts fat girls' feelings when he makes fun of fat girls. Wah. And they all completely turned on him. And it was all a plot. And the thing is, cheaters never win. Sometimes they do. But in this case, Hillary Clinton tried to win essentially through this strategy and shot herself in the foot. Now they're trying the same thing again. Remember, in the midterms last year, they avowedly did this, and they openly, and it was widely reported, that Democrats, the Democratic Party was urging Democrats to donate, not just vote for or something, but to donate to the more radical right-wing Trumpian candidates in the primaries, so they would be easier to beat in the fall. And it worked. In fact, I think I read a thing that it said it worked in every case. They helped Trumpian wingnuts get the nomination and then stomp them in the general. So
pretty smart.
It works, except when it doesn't.
It works except for when it's Hillary Clinton.
That's right. The reason Hillary Clinton's not doing her second term right now is because sometimes it doesn't work. But I think that, look, what you just said, Henry, there's a possibility that the reason that they're indicting him is to make sure he wins, is to boost his popularity and make him seem like more of a martyr to the Republican base, because they figure Biden beat him once, Biden can beat him again. But if he's, confronted with prison time, then that's even better than framing him for treason with Russia when it comes to really tying a ball and chain around his foot and weighing him down and preventing him from winning the election. So it could be that they think they're that smart. And again, it could backfire.
Well, Trump voters could be voting. There's a possibility. They could be going to the vote to keep their man out of jail or to free their man. There's something to that personal connection. Like, we gotta free Trump. We gotta free him.
Hey, it worked for Netanyahu, man. He's the prime minister again right now because he did whatever it took to keep himself out of prison.
Yep, you're right.
Yep.
Ain't that a bitch? We had a send off for Netanyahu when he left office last, and we're like, bye, and we did a whole segment on it. And then
we had a compilation
a couple years
of
later,
all of his
back.
most ridiculous speeches about blaming the Palestinians for the Holocaust, and it's just his worst moments.
Right.
The countless times about the 6 months Iran is about to build a nuclear weapon. Right. And I guess we can't beat Netanyahu because he was back. But now the Israeli politics. Israeli politics is so crazy right now. Like, they've swung so far to the right, and I think even liberal Democrats right now. I was talking to Sheldon Richman. Sheldon Richman was on the show a couple, maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, and we were talking about Israeli politics, and they've swung so far to the right, and they have some real freaks in government right now, where even the liberals are kind of embarrassed, where they're just like, oh, don't look at this. This is kind of an embarrassment. It's a very weird situation.
Yeah, it's a real ugly one too. I mean, I'm talking today with Connor Freeman, who was writing about how they're about to announce a brand new expansion of settlements on the West Bank, and there's this what they call Area E, I guess, and it's this space where if they finish building in this settlement, filling in, I guess, the space with these settlements, then that will forever block East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. It's like the only kind of corridor between the two.
Meanwhile, I read that President Xi in China is supporting the idea of an independent Palestinian state now. Oh,
yeah. Well, he should have said something a long time ago, because that ship has sailed. Yeah. I don't know. I guess some people disagree with this still, but I think more and more people are realizing that it's just too late for that. There are too many Israeli Jewish settlers on the West Bank for it ever to be any kind of state. They've already seized too much of East Jerusalem to ever have it be the capital city. And that's it. As Netanyahu himself said, there will always only be one security force between the river and the sea, the state of Israel. There'll never be a Palestinian state there. He already declared that. And so the other alternative then is equal rights for everybody.
Right. One state solution.
The one state solution. And it's funny, I brought this up to a couple Palestinians that I know, and they both hate this. I should bring it up to more and see if I can get anybody else to agree.
Well, I'm half Palestinian. What's your opinion? Give it to me.
I mean, I'm talking about guys who are in, I'll say it's Ramzi Baroud and Ali Abu Nima. They're both one state guys. They're both, they don't believe in two-state illusion BS at all. It's got to be one state. And so then I go, well, look, shouldn't you guys immediately just say, we all want Israeli citizenship? One man, one vote, full citizenship, like the Black Civil Rights Movement in the South. That should be the model, is we are all subject of the state of Israel. We all want to be citizens of the state of Israel. And then I understand how they feel, but it's almost like it's just a matter of pride. They're like, no, we don't want to be citizens of the state Israel. We want Palestine. And they can be citizens of Palestine with us. They don't have to leave. But
what if we hyphenate the name Israel Palestine?
Yeah, or why not? I don't know, man. But I mean, it works. There are binational states. You got a quadranational state there in Switzerland right now, where it's divided in four main kind of pieces that all get along in a federated system. There's got to be a way. The status quo absolutely sucks. It's completely intolerable. So, I don't know how it's ever going to change. But if the arc of history bends toward justice, it's going to break here pretty soon over Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I mean, you would think it's not sustainable, but it continues to go on. But I guess we'll see. Like the birth rates for Arab Muslims, I mean also Arab Christians is much higher. But then they import people from the former Soviet Union states, and the Haredi population is the fastest growing demographic in Israel. So I mean that's why there's such a crazy right wing right now. Like the socialist labor leftist Israel. I mean, and those are the guys who did the actual, ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. So it's not like, they're, it's not like we're comparing them with, some egalitarian, utopian sect of Israeli politics. But, that Israel is kind of fading away, and it's going to become harder to, come up with excuses for them, especially in the current political climate where identity politics is so prevalent. So I don't know where it's going to go. Things like this guy like Itamar Ben-Gvir and his private army, which is like it kind of sounds like an Azov battalion type thing in Ukraine. It's like, what are they going to do? Like the justification for creating this this private army in these settlements and these negotiations was to deal with like thievery. Like what is it? What is this? It sounded like something out of Mississippi, like a lynch squad out of Mississippi in the 1920s.
That's because that's what it is.
I mean, yeah, I guess we'll see how it plays out, but it's fucked.
I'll tell you what, man. I seen a guy on the Twitter there. He said, "Has anybody ever been convinced by an analogy before about anything? Seems to me like analogies are stupid and don't work." I think was the tweet. And then one of the first responses was a guy said, yeah, Scott Horton got me with an analogy on Israel-Palestine. He said, it's not like a fight between America and Mexico, as Ben Shapiro says. Instead, the Palestinians are like Indians on the reservation. Mm-hmm. They've already been conquered and surrounded and walled in literally here, and now they're being bombed. That's the analogy. So now you understand. See, it's misleading even when you just say Israelis and Palestinians. It sounds like you're talking about citizens of two separate countries.
Right.
But rather than, one group of people being occupied by the other, it's not descriptive. It doesn't say. And many Americans, in fact, there was a poll, I forget the numbers now, but the poll had was it a majority of people? It may have even been a majority of people in Grant Smith's poll thought that the Palestinians were occupying the Israelis. And, they say land for peace as though the Israelis are the victims and the Palestinians are extorting land out of them with terrorism. And they won't stop terrorizing the poor Israelis until they give up some of their land. And As long as nobody's there to go, well, exactly, it's sort of the other way around, and you got to understand that this and that. Without that, then the lie holds. It's the prevalent view, you know? There's nobody there to combat it, really.
I mean, it's a tough situation for sure. And that kind of keeps coming back to the thing that we've been talking about for this whole episode. It's just like, people don't know. And they're not interested to look into it and know. Because it's difficult. It's hard. It's nuanced. Israel-Palestine is among the most difficult topic to talk about from an objective standpoint, let alone just from a historical standpoint. You know, it's like, it's too hard to think about for most people.
Yeah. Well, it's a real mess. And I mean, honestly, I don't think it's all that complicated, but it's certainly made to seem to be. And I think that, you know, and this was always my frustration, even as a little kid. They talk about, oh, in Beirut, this and that and whatever happened. But they would never say, like, hey, in case you need to catch up, here's the thing about it, okay? You got this government that's made up of this faction and this faction, but the Israelis have decided they want to back this faction against this faction. That's why the thing with the thing. So here's the map, and now you understand. So that's why when the thing happened today, et cetera, they never explain. And even as like an elementary school student, I'm going, well, my elementary school teacher would explain, where is Lebanon? Why are they fighting? Who's on whose side? But they never damn do. They just go, well, somebody blew up somebody in Beirut today. And you're just going to have to go to college or something to figure out who's fighting with who. They're never going to tell you. And especially when it comes to Israel-Palestine. They're, you know, if you look at the map, you might even believe that Jordan invaded from the east and took a chunk out of Israel. That's what the West Bank looks like.
Around somehow.
You know, so unless somebody tells you, no, that's all that's left of Palestine after the Israelis have gobbled up everything else around it, then, oh, okay. But somebody's got to show you the map, and they got to tell you the history. And, you know, seems like they never do. In fact, I guess I'll go ahead and tell you, I don't know what's the big deal. After Robert Kennedy Jr. said his unfortunate things about Roger Waters there in Israel-Palestine, I wrote him up a memo. Because honestly, he sounded just totally ignorant about it. Like, oh, I stand with Israel and whatever. And it sounded like he didn't know anything about it. In fact, in the Greenwald interview, I think it's revealed that he does know a bit more about it than I had assumed. But I wrote him up a little memo on the basis of like, look, man, in case you don't know, but like, here's the 1, 2, and 3 of this whole thing, and how the two-state solution was always an illusion, and now that's canceled, and that's why Amnesty and HRW and B'Tselem officially call it apartheid now. It's because it is one state from the river to the sea, and so it's essentially, the analogy is to, you know, Indians on a reservation or blacks under Jim Crow apartheid in Mississippi or apartheid South Africa. This is essentially the deal. So, you know, and then I sent it to him, although I'm not positive I had the right email address, but then I sent it to one of his guys, and I have every reason to believe it was forwarded on to him. And he continued to say all this completely ridiculous Hasbara talking points. If you watch the Glenn Greenwald interview, it's just cringe, as the kids say now, where he goes, oh, I bet an Arab would rather live in Israel than any other Arab state in the region. And it's like, first of all, we're talking about people living in the occupied territories, not Arab citizens of Israel, dude. The people in the occupied territories live like shit. They live far worse than anybody in any other country in the Arab world right now, unless maybe the Shiite minority in Saudi Arabia, or, you know, somebody caught in the middle of America's evil proxy war in Syria or something like that. The average Jordanian or the average, you know, Qatari or Kuwaiti are absolutely living better than a Palestinian in the Gaza ghetto. Are you kidding me? You know, and just a talking point like that, like, I didn't have time to look it up. I need to look it up. But I'm almost positive that comes from Frank Luntz's Global Language Dictionary from 2008, the Israeli Hasbara Handbook, of which is awesome. If you've never read that, you got to read it. It's called the Global Language Dictionary by Frank Luntz, 2008. And he was hired by the Israel lobby to do focus group testing to figure out how to bullshit people into supporting Israel. So if you tell them the truth, they'll hate it. So you have to lie about everything, and you have to pretend that the Palestinians they go, it's like apartheid over there. It's like Jim Crow Mississippi in the 1920s. I tell you why an Israeli Jew can't just live wherever they want in the West Bank. Because the Palestinians are Arab supremacists who treat them like the poor blacks of Mississippi. And it's just like, wow, you guys are good, man. I really give you credit. That like, oh yeah, we're committing the war crime of transferring our civilian population into foreign territory that our military is occupying, and we'll make it where now, where they're the Klan and we're the poor blacks who can't just live where we want and do what we want. And the whole thing is like that. And he says in there, I love the language of it is hilarious because it's full of things where he's like, look, if we tell the truth about this, it's kind of a problem. So what we really want to focus on is say it this way. And every bit of it, how to make, how to win friends and influence people, how to win friends and influence people for Israel. And the answer is you have to lie to them from morning to night. You have to lie to them about everything. You have to take every truth and turn it upside down and inside out so people don't know which way is up anymore. Then they'll support Israel. When you turn their brain to jelly, when you got them so damned confused that they give up, then they'll agree with you.
Spin is real on that, huh?
It is. I'm telling you, it's hilarious to read. It's really funny. And I guarantee you, dude, I need to go look this up, man. Or somebody email me because I'm too lazy. And I'm not lazy. I'm busy. But I guarantee you that talking point about, I bet an Arab would rather live in Israel than in another Arab country. I bet you that comes from Frank Luntz and those focus groups. I guarantee it. Hear Robert Kennedy talk like that is shameful.
If I was a journalist, and I'm not a journalist, I would explore deeper into RFK's like funders and what he's trying to achieve with that. I feel like he definitely knows better than what he's saying, and I wonder if the same kind of Zionist groups that back Trump are backing RFK Jr. Because I don't know, maybe they're seeing they can hedge their bets with him if Biden's so unpopular that they might as well support him. Yeah, I guess they could always go with the rogue, but I mean, they may see him as an alternative. Let's just say for people who would be likely voting for Trump and maybe Democratic voters who flipped from Obama to Trump. I really wonder where this maybe he's just an old school Democrat, because old school Democrats were the original guys who are really bad on the Israel-Palestine question. So maybe it's just that. But I'm curious.
He told the story of during the 67 war that his dad said, yeah, don't worry, the Israelis will be fine. They're tough. We're a good pro-Israel family. And of course, Sirhan supposedly was motivated to kill him by his support in the Senate for arms transfers to Israel, which he doesn't believe that, but I think he, used to. So it's kind of poison against the Palestinians in that sense. But if he read my memo and then threw it out and thought nothing more of it, then I'd be pretty damn disappointed, because I made a lot of great points in there about it. It ain't just so cut and dry. Look, if you want to go look, here's Israel is taking on Egypt, Syria, and Jordan all at once. How heroic or something. Well, whatever. I mean, Israel started that war, but fine. But that's not what's going on here. Israel's friends with Egypt and Jordan, and they bomb Syria about every other week with impunity. And what we're talking about is the way they treat their own domestic population by refusing to ever really admit that they are a domestic population, even though they've taken the land. They've de facto annexed it all, but they refuse to de jure annex it, because then that means they've de jure annexed the people, and now they live in a de jure apartheid state instead of just a de facto one. So they play these word games, but meanwhile, they treat these people absolutely terribly. And man, Kennedy on Greenwald's show, where he's like, well, they had a chance to have a state in 48 and in 2000, and they gave it up. It's like, dude, in 48, the Israelis made a secret deal with Jordan to take the West Banks just so the Palestinians couldn't have a state. So that's just not true. And I mean, they might have said, no, we won't accept an Israeli state with us getting what's left. at the time, when it was originally proposed by the UN General Assembly, which of course had no authority to do any such thing in the first place, but they had no obligation to accept somebody else building a state on their land. And then when it comes to them rejecting the opportunity to have their own state, that's just not true. They got screwed out of it. And in 2000, Robert Malley wrote all about this. Biden's current guy dealing with Iran is the same guy that was there working with the Clinton administration when Dennis Ross hosted the Camp David talks, where they just outright lied and said that the Israelis had offered a full Palestinian state to Yasser Arafat and that Yasser Arafat declined it and turned it down. And it was just not true. It was Israel's lawyer, they called him Dennis Ross, who's not a uninterested negotiator, was absolutely on Israel's side. And as Robert Malley wrote in The Guardian and in the New York Review of Books, the Israelis actually never even made an offer for Arafat to reject. So they just built this whole narrative that they had handed the whole thing, all of the 22% of what was left of Palestine, to Arafat on a silver platter, Ehud Barak had, and that he turned it down. It was just a lie. Never happened. Never happened. And then they go, oh yeah, well, we got this cute little cliche. The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And since that's a cute little goddamned focus grouped public relations thing, it doesn't matter if it's true at all. At all. We just say it over and over again, and idiots will repeat it and believe it. Like Homer Simpson. That rhymes, and admit. Oh, that's a cute little cliche figure of speech to say. They never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Oh, yeah? Well, why don't you give an example of a single opportunity that they ever had? You can't because you're liars.
Mm-hmm. You know what my favorite one is? If the Arabs laid down their weapons, there would be, they would kill the Israelis. I think I have it backwards. I'm not even getting the phrase right, but it's something along the lines of, if the Israelis put if the Arabs put their weapons down,
there will be peace. Mm-hmm.
And then if the Israelis put their weapons down,
there will be no Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. That's one of my favorite ones. I've heard that so many times.
Yeah, and what's her name? It's amazing how these things get beaten into people's heads, repeated over and over as cliches like this. Where there's another one that when the Palestinians love their own children as much as they love killing ours, or something like that. Golda Meir said, or when they love their children as much as we love ours, that's when we'll have peace. Some kind of crap.
There's a Family Guy of Peter. Peter's trying to convince everyone to go to war, and he's like, well, everyone, if you don't support this war, then you're gay. And then everyone's like, well, I support the war. I support the war. Like, I was the first one to support the war.
There's a South Park that came out right at the time, 20 years ago, at the dawn of Iraq War II, where it was about whether to go to Iraq or not. And it was, Saddam Hussein used to be a recurring character in South Park, but he was not even in this episode, or he was barely in it. It wasn't about him. The town was divided between country and rock and roll. And if you're for country, you support the war. And if you're for rock and roll, then you're against it. And you think that Bush is just a Houston oil guy and blah, blah, blah. And then that was the whole divide in the town. Was all the rednecks were for it and all the townspeople were against it. And because it's all just social psychology, whose side are you on? You do the same episode now, and it would be, if you're country, you want to bomb China. If you're rock and roll, you want to bomb Russia. And if you're either, you want to let the Israelis kill all the Palestinians and take their land.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's excuse me. It's crazy. And just going back to Trump, man, it's the effort to frame this guy, the effort to put this guy in jail. Was he really a Bulworth? Was he really stopping anyone from doing anything that they wanted? I mean, we were still funding Ukraine while he was president. I mean, we were still had the war in Yemen while we were in president. Like, what did he do?
I mean, as you know, he's very close with some neoconservatives and with Sheldon Adelson, who is was the most important bankroller of Likud party causes in the United States. At the same time, a lot of the neocons absolutely rejected him because he, in a way, in his instincts, not in any real policy, but in his instincts, he's a little bit of a throwback to an older nationalism before all this post-World War II global world order enforced by America thing. And he would say things like, why are we subsidizing Korea and Japan and Germany's militaries and defense when they're all rich first world countries? They can afford their own defense. And they hear stuff like that and they go, shut up, you idiot. Because to them, they don't give a damn about picking up the cost. We're the ones who have to pick up the cost. But to them, this is how they exercise control. Japan, South Korea, and Germany, listen, we'll subsidize all your military costs, but you let us control your foreign policy. And you don't get to have a foreign policy of your own. You're under our thumb as part of our umbrella, our security empire around the world. And Trump wants to cash that in just for money. He wants to trade this splendid, dominant, global, imperial position just because he doesn't see the profit in it, when to them, there's this much higher kind of value at stake. And the same thing like with his just kind of gut reaction to the war in Afghanistan and the wars in the Middle East. Why are we doing this? This is stupid. This is like you can imagine him as kind of like an old right-wing Archie Bunker type who probably really supported Iraq War II. But then after a while, he doesn't have that much of an emotional connection to it. And he's just like, this is a waste. We're wasting all this money, as he put it repeatedly. We don't even get to keep the oil. It's like, what does he imagine? Like some giant spoon just comes and scoops it all out at once and we take it home with us. We don't get to keep the oil. Why are we even doing this if we don't even get to steal the money, So that's part of why the neoconservatives really turned against him. And really, I guess, the mainstream kind of conservatives and the center-left Democrats, like they really, or take a look at the center-left Democrats. They projected onto him like all of the most extreme things he ever said as his, heartfelt and etched in stone position. So he would say something like, and I'm not talking about leftist people, I'm talking about liberals in power here. He would say something like, well, I don't know why we need NATO. And they go into absolute panic attacks and conniption fits, right? And then he would go, I don't know, I think Germany and France and all them, they're supposed to spend at least 2% of their GDP on military hardware, especially from us. And they're not paying up their fair share. So I don't know why we need NATO so much if our allies don't think that they need it. So what's he really doing? He's trying to strengthen NATO. He's trying to get our allies to spend more money on their militaries, and in order to subsidize American business, of course, as well. But that's how he negotiates. He's a businessman, not a diplomat. So he goes, I don't know why I need your stupid NATO at all. Maybe we should change it into an anti-terrorist organization. What do we need with it, having it in Europe at all? Some of them completely flipped out. Now, some of us, will take me versus Raimondo. Raimondo is going, oh, it's my dream come true. You hear he's going to get us out of NATO. And I'm going, would you shut up? No, he's not either, dude. So if you wanted to believe in him, you could, or if you wanted to believe the worst about him, and you could just take what he said and make what you will of it, For me, I was always looking at more like, measuring what else he's up against here. What is his real point? He never really said he's going to get us out of NATO. And he certainly never really believed we don't belong in NATO and NATO shouldn't exist. And all these things like Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul, who have written, 100,000 words each on why we ought to get the hell out of NATO over the years, right? He didn't have strong opinions like that. But then these people They don't know. They get all their information from television. They never read Pat Buchanan or Ron Paul either. They thought that he really was going to abolish NATO. He's going to completely, dismantle American power in the world, and for nothing. And then when Hillary and the FBI and the CIA framed him for treason, a lot of them believed it. I mean, here was a guy who said he wanted to get along with Russia, but if it's already received wisdom that Putin is Stalin, that after, and this was the narrative starting especially in 2014, after he seized Crimea, he couldn't have done that because Obama just did a bloody coup. So instead he did it because he's evil and he's trying to recreate the Soviet Union and all of this stuff. So for Trump to say he wants to get along with Russia, he wants to short circuit the Cold War, left many of them thinking they don't know any other person who thinks that. They think Putin is the absolute worst. This is the cause of our generation. This is the Iraq War II of our era. We got to face down Putin. And this guy Trump wants to just, end all that. He wants to end the Cold War. He wants to give away the story. It must be treason. It must be true. They've got something on him. They've got him blackmailed. And they've got him under control through Manafort and Page and Flynn, telling him what to do and communicating with his secret server at the Alpha Bank and all of this crap. It had to be right. And I mean, imagine the whole thing was so damn stupid of you the whole time, Henry. But imagine for a minute that you were some stupid NPR listening lady, Hillary Clinton voter, who really believed the entire Russiagate conspiracy theory the whole time. Moscow, not the commies, not the commies anymore, but still Moscow did a coup d'etat and overthrew the government of the United States of America and installed this far right-wing racist fascist, in power. It's going to destroy democracy forever. It's the highest emergency. They got so caught up in that narrative. Even to this day, they still believe it. Polls show huge numbers of, vast majorities of Democrats still believe in the Russiagate lie. It's the only way, well, I don't know if that's the only way they could explain it, but they sure bought it when that's what they were told. But now, as far as like the real, power elite and what they really feared from him, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say like the biggest disruption that he really caused anywhere was by the massive trade war with China. But they all kind of wanted that too. They all want to pick this fight with China over Taiwan just as bad as Trump does. So I don't know, did he like screw over particularly Democratic tied corporations or something like that in that trade war? I don't know. But, honestly, man, I think it goes back to maybe our original, a big part of it, maybe a bigger part than I appreciate, because it's just not my perspective. It goes back to our original conversation about this stupid culture war. They got up there and denounced Mexicans as a bunch of rapists. And he just said, in their eyes, that was what he said. Anyway, it's not exactly what he said, but it was close. And what they heard was a guy who's like 2 clicks to the right of Buchanan and dumb and mean. Buchanan's a sweet guy. Say what you want about his politics if he's to the right of you on whichever issues. But Pat Buchanan's a wonderful man. And here Donald Trump is just mean and willing to demonize people. Thank God this finally ended with the Russiagate scare. But remember, he spent the campaign demonizing Muslims and demonizing Hillary for not being willing to denounce radical Islam. Wherever someone believes in Islam real hard, it turns them into a terrorist. And why won't she admit the truth about that, which is the worst, just goddamn dumbest, most horrible John Bolton, Michael Savage-esque propaganda lies from 2005. This is horrible that he did that. And, but that's that kind of thing. It caused a reaction among the very PC, the very wokeists at that time, that he was just so against their zeitgeist of that era,
I'd honestly argue a lot of the wokeism comes from a reaction to this. It had already been stirring in the background, but now suddenly we've got somebody on this far, I'm going to say right, because I don't even know where to place Trump, really. Just the far end of that, whatever spectrum he's on. And he's coming out and saying these absolutely nasty things that are just abhorrent. And I think that triggered a lot of people into being louder about their belief system. They're like, if this guy is going to be
he's an
loud
easy
and
he's an
stupid-
easy guy to some degree to like, but he's also, I don't blame anyone from being utterly repulsed by Trump. I don't blame a single person by being utterly repulsed by him. But I don't blame anyone for loving him either. It's kind of, I'm in a weird situation.
But you're right, Danny, that he's a troll. This is a South Park 2, where Donald Trump is, I guess they have Garrison as him, but he's just a troll, and he gets everyone else fighting. And the more that people take his side, the more these people react against it, and the more those people make fun of them and react back and forth. He's like, he strikes a match and drops it and moves on, and lets these people, they build their own echo chambers in opposition to just one little phrase he uttered or something. And look, it's true that, my friend Anthony had this great little soliloquy about how it used to be the best thing about the liberals was that they weren't the left. And the best thing about the left is that they weren't liberals. Because they're both good and bad on so many things. And so, for example, this is a little bit earlier version of liberals now, but that's what we're talking about. Previously, liberals were good on free speech, good on capitalism. Not good, but not great, but
They made
decent.
peace with business.
Yeah, they'd made their peace with business. They're not communist revolutionaries. They're liberals. They're, under the American system, our quasi-free market Philip Drew system that we live in.
They're not gonna confiscate people's farmland.
Yeah.
Agricultural. They,
And then, but because they've made their compromise with business, they're imperialists, right? They're not libertarians who have this ideology about free market capitalism and peace. They're just a bunch of sellouts. So they'll support the military-industrial complex killing 4.5 million people, and they don't give a good goddamn about it. That's what makes them liberals. They're essentially principle-less kind of scum in that way. Then you have the leftists. Now, the leftists hate cops and hate imperialism and all this corruption and wars and militarized police state and do all this great journalism and all these kinds of things. But man, they don't believe in property at all. They think to own something is to steal it from everyone else because everyone owns everything instead of anyone owns anything. And so their entire conception of property rights is completely stupid and commie and backwards and wrong. And when they have power, we see they absolutely hate freedom. And they'll crack down, they'll absolutely ban free speech. They'll even ban the free exercise of religion, all of these things. They get a hold of your agriculture policy, you're dead. Okay, so then, but the deal is then Trump came. And Trump, this giant troll, got everybody so worked up that he got the leftists and the liberals to paper over their differences. And, of course, as one could expect, both sides dropped what they used to be good on in order to compromise with the other side. So now leftists stop caring about cops, or if anything, they just want to legalize violent crimes. They don't want to hold cops accountable for anything, and they don't give a damn about the wars anymore at all. They won't say a word about that anymore. And then the liberals dropped all their support for free speech and for capitalism, and now are far more commie, and then also adopted the worst identity politics of the leftists in pitting every group and every class that you can possibly categorize has to be at war with all other groups and categories at all time in a fight to the death and all of this crap. And so they both just, Trump really did make them that much worse. In fact, I have a friend who said that this is probably the best case against him coming back. It's just what he
Make it
did to
worse.
the left. They
Oh
are
yeah, because
so
he empowers all those institutions.
Yeah.
Like, was there ever a bigger power boost for them from the years that he was elected, from when he was removed? I mean, how much money did all these these weird liberal institutions get from different donors?
Oh yeah. And all the most wealthy people are all center left liberals now. It used to be, I don't know, they all are, but vast majority of them. When I was a kid, the very most wealthy were usually considered to be right-wing country club Christians, Christian conservatives. Not too conservative or too Christian, more country club, but still on the right. Reaganites and H.W. Bushites. But I think that's not the case anymore. I think they really are, almost all the billionaires are ESG up to their eyebrows.
I read this and I kind of agree with it, that the Republican Party is becoming the party of downward mobility. I think there's some truth. I think there's truth to it. Like the Republican Party is becoming the party of downward mobility, and the Democratic Party is basically a coalition between the people of this country who are in utter poverty, mostly like poor black people or poor minorities, and the managerial class, like your CEOs and your college educated and your master's degrees. I mean, that's the political coalitions that we see today. But Scott, one thing I know, I when I reached out, I said, let's do a podcast on why liberals are the worst people on earth. Whenever I think that, whenever I say, oh man, liberal Democrats are really just the worst people in politics, I always remember this phrase, Islamofascism. And I go back, wait a second, conservatives are still the worst people. Like it's both are terrible. I guess Islamofascism hasn't been a trendy word in a while, so they're a little bit more. It's easier to stomach them, but man, like just going back to like how when Trump rose off the birther conspiracy. Mm-hmm. I remember listening to Michael Savage, because I like talk radio, and say what you want about Michael Savage, he's definitely a horrible bastard and quite a crazy nut job. But
his real name is Wiener, and he used to be a communist.
Yeah, he used to be, and then he got the promises of prominence, like with his weird kind of voodoo health remedies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's what he was. He did. I'm not sure what he did, but he was like a health guy, but it was like alternative health. But yeah, he's a crazed nut. But he was one of those. He's still entertaining to listen to in a talk radio perspective. I remember listening to him and him pushing like the Obama is a Muslim conspiracy, and that was like something that really kind of united a lot of right wingers. Like, oh, Obama's this secret Muslim. We can't let this secret Muslim. There used to be. I used to hear this from the right, that the Muslims control the media. Like, just how ridiculous of a statement is that?
So preposterous.
The Muslims control the media.
In fact, look, I'm glad you brought this up, because, shout out to all the right wingers listening now. Remember how once Trump came to power, all of this crap about radical Islam was just over. And now we're on Russiagate. And now we're on Ukrainegate. And now we're on COVID. And now we're on Ukraine. And all this crap about how everywhere, all around the world, there's 1.5 billion Muslims. And if any of them believe in Islam 1 degree harder than they already do, they're going to turn into a suicide bomber and come and kill us all. We live in a nation with 3 million to 5 million Muslims in it, in every city in this country. And they're all sleeper cell terrorists. And they're all going to kill us all. And if it's up to them, they're going to enslave us under Sharia and make it illegal to produce any more little white babies ever again. It's absolute garbage that right-wingers listening to me, you believed this just a few years ago. And then remember how easy it was for them to just turn it off. They just turned it off. You might have forgot all about it. Radical Islam. That's why we have to have a war. In George W. Bush said we got to kill people in 60 countries. That's why we have to torture people to death. Otherwise, they'll nuke our cities. That's why we have to attack Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Niger, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, and Chad. And that's why we got to send the Green Berets back to the Philippines, to the Pankisi Gorge in the Caucasus Mountains. Because radical Islam.
The fraudsters they championed, like that lady from Somalia, Ali Hersi Ali.
Yeah, I debated her. Total fraud. Yeah.
Like
she threatened in that debate, she said, if it's not us, Saudi Arabia could take over the world. And look, man, Bridget Gabriel and all of that. Remember the Sharia law hoax? This whole thing was cooked up by a guy named Rabbi Yarushami from New York City. Oh, he was so concerned that the people of Colorado and the people of Arizona and the people of Texas were all about to be enslaved under Sharia law. The whole thing was just a public relations exercise to make right-wingers reason, if you can call it that there must be a problem, or else why are we doing this? When, of course, there was nothing at all. The only application of Sharia law in America is like in divorces and custody cases where religious law is respected by the local civil courts the exact same way that they respect Catholic law and Jewish law when it comes to divorces and custody. They don't inflict Sharia on non-Muslim families. This is when there's a divorce and they agree that they want to do it according to the hadith of whatever the hell. Get the F out of here. The whole thing was a lie by guess who? Zionists. People who are trying to get Americans to hate and fear Muslims because that's who Israel is stealing from and killing. It's as simple as that. It's just a public relations exercise. And seriously, like people listening to this, did you believe that in the Sharia law hoax? Ask yourself, whoa, wait a minute, that was me. I believed in that. Well, why? How? How did you let yourself be susceptible to such nonsense in a country of 350 million people? Think 3 million, not even in a county in Michigan is there Sharia law inflicted on any substantive matter whatsoever, and certainly against any unwilling person.
Or any risk of it, for that matter.
And here's the best part of it. So all these people, like the Pulse nightclub shooting, I guess that wasn't a good case, but the Draw Muhammad contest where the guy went over with a gun and he was shot dead on the spot. He was encouraged by the FBI. Now right-wingers, that war on terror that they supported against Muslims has been turned inwards towards them. And it's like you couldn't think of something more ironic or more of a poetic kind of conclusion to this. I mean, maybe it's not the conclusion of it, but it's just you couldn't write it. You couldn't write this in a script.
Well, look, they should have known better. I mean, look, Iraq War II was nothing but Waco writ large. You're supposedly, and actually the right-wingers sided with the government on Waco. That's why they didn't learn that lesson. They should have learned that lesson. Wait a minute, he's crazy. We can't negotiate with him. He's got illegal weapons and he's bad to his own people. So
he's got child brides.
I heard this one before. Like I'm sorry, what?
He has child brides.
Yeah. So, I heard this story before, but they fell for it. They should have absolutely known better than all of these things. And look, in the 1990s, you had the, mother of all sting operations was the Oklahoma City bombing. This thing was riddled with government informants from beginning to end, CIA and FBI, and including an ATF informant who reported back to the ATF about what the FBI informants were planning before they did it. And then they got away with it. Right-wingers ignored that and let the government, law and order, get away with blaming it on one guy and his idiot friend who was 600 miles away at the time. But then, they entrapped the Viper militia. Remember that? In Arizona, those guys were entrapped by a federal informant. And there were guys who it was some train track plot in the Midwest somewhere. Anyway, they were essentially, going around. In fact, I knew in the 1990s, this was the cliche that, and even left over from J. Edgar Hoover days, that if anywhere there's a meeting of 3 members of the Ku Klux Klan, 2 of them are FBI informants. And so everybody already knew that. So for right-wingers going into the Bush years to say, we ought to absolutely and totally unleash the FBI. We ought to create an entire new Department of Homeland Security to look for threats to the homeland. For them to not know that this is going to come back to bite us in the face soon just go another example of their abject stupidity, their absolute refusal to deal with reality, that the government hates you. They'll burn a church full of little kids. You think they love you? You think they care about you? You're nothing but a Branch Davidian to them. All of you, no matter how much you love police, no matter how much you love government. Oh, we need law and order. We got to use the government to keep them leftists at bay. Yeah, again, that raid on Waco, I forgot, maybe I said this to the guys before you. That raid on Waco, that was a gun raid, but it was a drug raid too. It was all drug enhancements, provided all that militarization. You know, it's our enemy is the state. No matter how much your neighbors annoy you, they're not the ones who are coming for you. You know? In fact, even as much as they might want to enslave you, even if they hate your guts, they don't have the power to do it. This is one of the reasons I quit being such a conspiracy kook. I mean, really, it's because my conspiracies kind of stopped coming true and stuff. But also, I was saying to a libertarian friend of mine, hey, man, how come all libertarians aren't conspiracy kooks? In fact, we were talking about Philip Drew. And I was going, look, man, everybody knows that America is ruled by rich, white, right-wing corporate chieftains, and always has been. And everybody also knows how successful socialism has been in America over the last century. Well, don't you get it? That all this socialism is a right-wing plot, man. The whole thing is a conspiracy by the people on the right to essentially, regulate the economy to the hilt under their control. It's a plot. It's a giant commie plot. Right-wingers donating to left-wing foundations to support left-wing academics and economists to riddle our universities with all this commie claptrap to make it this way. And he goes, yeah, I guess that's a good point. I understand that, but tell me this then. How come all conspiracy theorists aren't libertarians? Because seriously, who gives a damn about the Freemasons or the Skull and Bones or the, Israeli neoconservatives or whoever if they don't have this massive empire to wield and use against people? Without the IRS to come and dig through your bank account, without the FBI to frame you for treason, then who gives a damn? Right? Let the Illuminati do their stupid little ceremony in their basement. As long as they don't have the power to inflict whatever plan that they have on anybody else. The power is the problem. It's not the abuse of power, as Harry Brown used to say. It's not the abuse of power, it's the power to abuse. And I really, there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I really decided, look, if it's not this group or that group or the other, then it would be another or another or another. The point is the power to abuse. The enemy is the state.
Hey, Scott, I want to segue into something a little bit way out of here, but it really flows with what you're saying. So you're talking about, conspiracy theories. You're talking about systems of power. You're talking about the other, right? If it's not this group or that group, it's some other group. I gotta get your opinion on some of the recent revelations that we've been seeing with this whistleblower coming out of the woodwork here, David Grush, talking about how we have spacecrafts of aliens.
I thought you were going to say Biden and Ukraine. No, look, I just don't believe in any of that crap, man. I think it's all a giant hoax and it's all a big distraction, and I don't believe in it. And, I have a friend who's a UFO guy. And I like him because he doesn't like all these other UFO guys because they're so full of it all the time and they bring up stuff that's already been debunked and whatever. And he's really trying to be careful and right. He's not just having fun, he's being a kook. He's really trying to be right about this stuff and marshal the very best evidence of things. And I admit, I haven't gone through all of his. I haven't asked him to give me the biggest presentation.
You got to give me his contact info so I can.
Yeah,
talk
why
to
don't
him.
Danny? I know Danny would love to talk to him.
I mean, I did ask. I could hook you up with him. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. He's a great guy.
Appreciate that.
But I asked him, send me your best paper on this stuff, your most convincing thing. And I started to read it, and I just wasn't getting it. It was just maybe it was too kind of not my style of writing, man. I'm more of just a newsy kind of a guy. I need names and dates and hard facts and things, and less kind of philosophizing about what we know about how dimensions work and stuff.
About this, Scott.
That's why I wanted to ask you about this, because this bit that's coming out right now is more names, dates, facts, and stuff, and less about, you know, lizard people or some shit like that, right? And I wanted to ask you about
the town drunk. Less about the town drunk, you know, appearing out of nowhere saying that he was anal. You know, he had
right. It's not that. This is some
Mr. Burns
guy and multiple other high level people that were involved in these UAP programs coming out and saying, we've been lying to Congress about the fact that we have this, and I don't know, man. It seems pretty convincing, and probably because I'm biased and I want it to be real.
You know what, man? Okay, so I used to be a cab driver. I used to listen to a lot of Art Bell. And I'll tell you, this country has always been lousy with former government people who say that they know all about this UFO stuff. I bet there's a list 100 names long.
Right.
None of them ever impressed me that this is really true. I never really thought that. Now, I've heard enough anecdotes that to me are much more believable. Like, I knew a guy who said that his father was an Air Force general, or his grandfather was an Air Force general. And he asked him, like, what is the deal with UFOs? And he said, well, they're real, but if you ever see one, it'll say United States of America on the wing.
Yeah.
You know, this kind of thing. So I don't know, like, you know, and even like I saw a thing that says like the vast majority of this huge group of sightings in Nevada, they all took place right around the time of the testing and the early flights of the SR-71. That this was just a plane that flew higher and faster than anybody had seen before, and they didn't know what the hell it was. And almost all of these things, I saw a UFO, it's a light in the sky. You don't know what's behind it or what it is. I know that a year ago, wasn't it a year ago, they came out with all this, the Navy released all this infrared footage of supposedly UFOs flying over the Pacific and all this stuff. But then right after that, I saw a video from a guy who, I can't remember, but he was like a co-founder of Compaq Computers or something like that. Some like, you know, extremely successful brand name computer company who had sold it and retired early at 35 or something. And now one of his things was he's a video expert, and he's an expert in every kind of video camera in the world and every kind of video imaging, this and that. And then he goes through and he goes, look, these are just all bullshit, all of them. None of these are unexplainable UFOs at all. He goes, this one, you're looking at the ass end of an F-15. That's what that is. You say you don't understand what it is. It's, you know, here's the thing and here's the other part of the engine and the whatever. This is an F-15 flying away from you. And he goes, and this one, the guys are saying that it looks like a plane, but it has no wings. But then when they search for it on radar, there's nothing there. And there are airline pilots in Brazil, and they're going, oh my God, what's going on? Well, what's going on is it's an optical illusion, Jim. That plane is twice as far away from you as you think it is, which is why you can't see its wings and why it's not where you're looking for it with your radar, because it's further away. And you just got yourself an optional conclusion, man, looking out that windshield. You just made a mistake, and on and on and on like that. And he's like, look, man, I'm an infrared imaging guy. I can tell you exactly, because here's a picture of a little boy walking and you see this halo around him, because that's an added effect of the infrared imaging to help you discriminate between objects and stuff. And so, and he's just going through and he's just showing example after example after example after example that everybody had just spent the last 2 weeks going, oh my God, the Navy even admits that it's all true. Nah. That's a bunch of crap, all of it, you know. I'll never get caught up in that shit. And look, you know what? It's a gigantic galaxy. Billions. I forgot how many billions of stars just in this galaxy. So, you know, maybe there's some things going on. But they're flying all the way the hell out here to this solar system to mess with us. I don't know.
I guess the new plug is that they're interdimensional. so
yeah, whatever, right? Yeah, you can fill in whatever you want as long as you're making up stuff. When I was a kid. I admit that when I was a kid in the 90s, there was a big kind of thing about aliens, the gray aliens with the big black eyes. There was a big fad. There was even a skateboard company, Alien Workshop and stuff.
The
And
X-Files.
when I was a kid, I remember like watching like Unsolved Mysteries where like the Air Force covered it up and they didn't even tell the president and stuff. And I remember that actually did help kind of set a precedent in my mind for like conspiratorial, higher level covert operations in government and whatever. Aliens aside, would the military and CIA be doing things that they don't even let the president know about? Like, I could see that, you know, stuff like that. They're just opening up the possibility that, you know, your security force, they're really in it for them, not for you. Not that I didn't already know that, because I knew Ronald Reagan was a dope pusher, and, you know, this is after Waco and everything still.
Well, here's what I think you should pay attention to, and it had nothing to do with the aliens, right? It has more to do with like how we react to whatever may come of this scenario, is that when the government starts doing shit to limit, you know, our access and our freedoms, utilizing this new thing, right? It could be like the new pandemic. It's just, aliens are real. We're afraid of them. We have to curtail your freedom. So pay attention for that reason.
But they never make that big of a deal out of it, right? They always leak out some stuff like this to catch people's attention, but it never becomes the dominant narrative that like, oh my God, the aliens are real and this is what we're doing this week. Like you see movies like that, we're like, oh my God, there's aliens, and the whole public has to now reckon with the fact that there really is such a thing. It never comes to that. It's always this kind of, you know, leak out stuff.
And here's the most important question.
My knee jerks the other way. I'm the kind of guy where like whenever there's a big news story, I always want to wait and hold my horses and not jump on the bandwagon, because so many times the thing that everybody's upset about isn't even true at all.
Right.
Here's the most important question. If there were aliens, let's just say they were an advanced alien race that had total dominance, military power over us, how quickly would our ruling class sell us out to get in favor with these aliens?
It's funny because the interview actually says that the interview with this guy actually says that we already have, like, our governments have already sold us out to those parties.
Like how? Because there would be no Independence Day. There would be no like united front. Like, we need to protect Earth. Like, we would 100% be like, hey, can you give us some of this alien technology so we can, completely eradicate Russia without them being able to?
Well, that was William Cooper, right? And behold the pale horse. That was what he says, is the aliens is suborned and controlled the ruling elite all this time. That was X-Files too, right? The cigarette smoking man was the liaison with the aliens and stuff.
That's exactly, Henry, what's being alleged here, which is why I find it so fascinating, right? Because it's like this is the most plausible of all of the alien theories, not because I want aliens to be real, but because the way that it's being presented, it just seems like, yeah, if aliens are real, all of the rest of what you're saying makes a whole lot of sense, you know?
Didn't Reagan tell Gorbachev? Reagan told Gorbachev that, hey, if the aliens came, you know, the U.S. and the Soviet Union would have to unite together to fight them, right?
That's right.
Like, no, that wouldn't happen. We would sell each other out. We'd be like, hey,
fuck those guys over there. Yeah.
Give us some of them lasers.
Yeah. No, that's a great anecdote, because that story that's how he really broke the ice with Gorbachev. Like, neither of these guys really knew what to make of each other. But, you know, Reagan loomed over him like a head taller than him and all these things. It's all handsome and broad shoulders.
In the pictures.
Stands over him and goes, you know, if the aliens attack, we're going to have to team up against them. And Gorbachev wasn't sure if he's supposed to laugh or if this kook is serious or what are we doing? And then I think at that point he laughed and it sort of broke the ice between them. I think that was from the first time they ever met. That was the first thing Reagan said to him and helped end the Cold War with that crack.
Well, maybe there can be a wise crack between whatever future president we have with whatever future president there will be in Russia, whether that be Putin or not.
Maybe aliens can help, right?
A horrible, catastrophic war.
Yeah. Look, I said then, not that anybody was listening to me or anything, but I said then that what Trump should have done, and this is before most of this stuff had really got rolling. You know, they didn't appoint the special counsel for a little while and whatever. As soon as he came into power, he should have invited Putin to D.C. He should have taken him out to see a show, a nice steak dinner, and then propose a badass comprehensive new nuclear weapons treaty. And then just tell the media and the rest of the government, that, look, you guys don't like this? Explain to the American people why we shouldn't be signing a new nuclear arms control treaty with Russia, and just called them all the way out on it, and gotten a good deal. You know, their narrative that Putin, that he worked for Putin, of course it was never true. So what if he had just dealt with Putin exactly like reality should have dictated anyway, and to hell with them? It would have been much better. He just let them push him around so damn much on that. Same thing happened with North Korea. He could have signed a deal with North Korea. But one, the Democrats had his own lawyer testify before Congress in real time right when he was meeting with Kim, which was, horrible. And then secondly, they had created this massive narrative. They must have said it 1,000 times in the media that, oh, Kim is just going to walk all over him. Trump is going to give away the whole store. Oh, that Kim, he's so smart and so crafty. And Donald Trump is such a traitor to America. And he's so stupid. He's such an idiot. And he's so desperate for a win here that we just know that he's going to give Kim everything he wants. And then Trump, being the coward that he is, backed down and didn't sign the deal, walked away from the deal because he was afraid of what the ladies on TV were going to say. It sucked. That kind of thing it's the worst thing about that guy. He's so flaky, and he wouldn't turn off the damn TV, man. I wondered if you could have redone his whole presidency where he just left the TV off, how different it would have been.
And Twitter out of his hand too.
Yeah, seriously. Remember. Yeah, we got work to do. Have a junior staffer watch TV and take some notes for you, man. Catch up at the end of the night.
Yeah, but he's so awesome that he doesn't really need to read anything because his natural instincts just, take care of everything because he's just a shit.
Him and W. Bush both, they know what to do.
All right, we got 2 hours and 25 minutes. All right, I have one more question for you. What was that question? I was going to ask you. I guess this can turn into a long-winded one, but do you think if Trump was president, if he won re-election, do you think there would be a war in Ukraine right now?
Oh, if he had been reelected? No.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, the proximate cause of the war was Joe Biden's first year in power, and the carte blanche that he gave to Zelensky to crack down on his opponents, his repeated promises to bring Ukraine into NATO, and proclamations by the Defense Department that we're going to double down on normalizing their military with ours, and interoperability, they call it, and all that, and just absolute repeated sticking the thumb in the eye of Vladimir Putin. So I don't even think it would have come to the ultimatum, probably. I mean, Trump was selling arms to Ukraine, but he was not Biden has this avowedly anti-Russian and pro-Ukrainian position that Donald Trump certainly did not have. So I doubt it would have even come to Putin issuing that treaty and making those demands. I think he probably would have approached it in a much smarter way, and he probably would have gotten an agreement. Certainly, everything would have played out differently. Okay, the year 2021 would have been entirely different, Henry. The war wouldn't have happened because we'd be living in a different world. Not that Trump would have done everything better, but it just would have been different. Would have been a totally different situation. In fact, it could have been worse. Trump was determined to tear up the START II treaty. He already had torn up the Open Skies Treaty and the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty and was promising to destroy New START. So what the hell do I know? I don't know. It could have been worse, but it would have been different.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's like the same ideological hatred of Russia that comes from that came from Trump, or even, the people around him. Yeah, but if McGregor was obviously part of his administration, I doubt that would happen. But he is not.
Yeah, that's really right. They do. The Biden people just absolutely have it in for Russia. Trump, again, he was never compromised by Russia, loyal to Russia, but he had what I consider to be a pretty pedestrian insight that it's hard to take on Russia and China at the same time. If we want to focus on China, as most Republicans do, then instead of pushing Russia toward China, we should be trying to persuade Russia to move toward the West and come closer with us, which assuming for the sake of argument, the strategy makes sense. And I believe Donald Trump when he says he met with Henry Kissinger and he asked Henry Kissinger, don't you think that we should be kissing up to Russia to separate him away from China? And Kissinger told him, yes, that's my recommendation. That's what I think we should be doing too. That was why they split China away from the Soviet Union 50 years ago, was because Russia was the senior partner. Soviet Union was the senior partner in the relationship. We wanted to strip away the weaker partner between the two and to bring them to our side to tilt them against their former partner there. And so it would be the same thing now. Would be stripping Russia away from China, the same way we stripped China away from the USSR. Now, what do we do? What did Biden do? Deliberately engaged in this policy of pushing Russia toward China. In fact, kicking them in the face right the hell out of Europe. You're not a part of Europe anymore. We don't care how white and Christian you are. You're Asiatic folk. Go and ally and trade with India and China and stay the hell out of our civilization, which is a horrible mistake to do. And not assuming, because I don't think we need to have a fight with China at all, but we should not be trying to kick the Russians out of Europe in this way. The whole thing is so unnecessary. And I really agree with Mearsheimer about the fact that they didn't even really start demonizing Putin. I mean, there was a bit of this and that. Cheney talked his smack and Hillary Clinton did too. But they didn't really demonize Putin until after Crimea in 2014, which was the direct result of the bloody coup. And then after the bloody coup, he seized Crimea, and then the Americans had to invent this narrative that he did it because now he's a psycho, and now he's a madman, and now he's Hitler, and now he's Stalin, and now he's the Tsar, and now he wants to recreate the old Russian Empire or Soviet Union. And, as Hillary said, that when he took Crimea, that's just like when Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia. I'm like, man, but they're liars. It was their fault. That's why the book is called Provoked, the book I'm working on. They go all day long, unprovoked attack, unprovoked attack. Well, it's such a tell. It's like winking every time you lie in poker or something. Like, we can see the reason you call it provoked is because you provoked it and you know it and you're lying. Simple as that.
Well, good segue to push your book. When's the time frame right now? I think I've heard you interview up to 700 pages.
Yeah, it's 753 pages right now. And it ain't full of hot air. It's all good stuff in there. I know that everybody's gonna like it. If you liked the last books, you'll like this one. But I really hope to have it done by the end of the year. And I'm sorry to say, because I wanted it to be done by now. I wanted it to be done a year ago. But I can't quit writing the damn thing. It's huge. It's everything that Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump, and Biden ever did wrong when it comes to dealing with Russia. And that's a hell of a lot, man. So I got every color-coded revolution in Bosnia and Kosovo and Chechnya and all of Barack Obama, the bloody war, the coup d'etat and the horrible war in the East and all of this stuff. So I'm hard at work on it all the time, man. And I'm trying very hard to wrap it up.
Well, we're looking forward to it.
Well, I'm very excited about the book, and I know that. Make an unabridged version for the dorks who want to read everything. If you try to edit it down, because I love all of your books, even the transcript book that you released, Hotter Than the Sun. So I guess let everyone else know where to find your work. What other books that everyone listening should read, and we'll let you go.
Cool, man. Thank you. And I'm glad you liked Hotter Than the Sun. I've read a few books of interview transcripts, and usually they're not very good, but I really stand by that one. I think it's really great. And it's interviews of all different experts on all aspects of nuclear weapons. So between the major nuclear weapon states, also all the rogue states, the military-industrial complex, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and anti-nuclear war activists. And there's just tons of great stuff in there. I'm really proud of that one. But as you said, it's interview transcripts. I didn't write it, but I do think it's great.
Let me just add one thing. For anyone who's writing because we have foreign policy people, people in college, the fact that he put this in a transcript, it makes it a lot easier to source this in whatever papers that you want. So it's a big service to take all those interviews and put them in a book. It will make your life a lot easier if you're writing like a thesis or a paper. So it's a great resource, and there's how many 20 different interviews, 28, 30 interviews. I know it's a lot. So you got like Ellsberg in there, and so it's a great book. I felt like it was. I feel like those transcript books are written for me, to be completely honest. So I really appreciate it. But then also Enough Already, Fool's Errand, great books. Just Your Podcast, The Scott Horton Show, which is one of the few podcasts that I really listen to on a consistent basis. And then of course antiwar.com, and then the Libertarian Institute, where you're going to find just amazing work all around. So make sure, whenever someone tells me, I'll be honest, I get two reactions whenever you come on, Scott. It's usually this is the majority of the reactions are like, man, that Scott Horton guy is awesome. I need to follow what he does. And then the other one is like absolute venom, where it's like, how dare you have that guy bash the police in the middle. And then those are the two reactions that we typically get, which is great on both ends.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I don't
And
mind
we're
that.
definitely, and we kept it fair, because as much time we spent bashing liberals today, we also took a very fair amount of time to bash conservative right wingers. So I feel
Hey, look,
like
I'm a libertarian, man. I'm no partisan at all. And my real book, Afghanistan's one thing, but what I've been working on for 20 years is Enough Already. And that's the history of all our Middle East interventions from Jimmy Carter all the way through Trump. And that anyone who takes a look at that and gives it a fair hearing, I think will conclude that all of these presidents suck and both parties suck. And you'll certainly conclude that I don't fear or favor any of them at all. The two presidents I hate the most personally, did I already say this, or was that the last interview? The two I hate the most personally are Clinton and Bush, W. Bush. The rest I also hate, but not like on I'd like to not finish that sentence kind of level, like it is with these two. But if you want to know like what I think about any of the choices that they made, from Carter, Reagan, Bush, and all the way through, I'm completely nonpartisan. I condemn them all. I got a vendetta against them all, and they deserve it. I mean, it's not a problem of mine. It's them. And I just finished doing an interview with a guy right before you, who was, I guess he was formerly a hawk, and was reading some Austrian economics, and a guy gave him my book, and it just absolutely blew him away. Because everything that he'd ever believed in and supported was wrong, but then he felt okay admitting it. I'm like, damn, you got me, dude. So that's what I was going for with that book. I wrote that book not for you, but for your right-wing father-in-law, for your dad, for your next-door neighbor or cousin who could use some anti-war shtick from somebody who's not a communist. That's what it really is. And I know that it's just true. I know from the anecdotes and from the sales that this book has really gotten through to people. And, a guy told me on Twitter a few weeks back, I guess a few months back now, said, I heard a loud noise. And I thought, oh no, I think my old dad fell down or something. I ran in the next room, and all that had happened was he threw your book across the room, and it hit the wall, and now he's pacing around cursing Ronald Reagan and cursing himself, because he's got to admit that it wasn't right. And so that's what the point of the book was, is to give you an opportunity to change your mind without having to go completely bananas over it, and just admit that, okay, you got me, dude. That's what I want the next book to be called. That's what Enough Already or Provoked should also be able to be called, as like a subtitle or an alternative title. You gotta admit. You gotta admit. You can't fade my footnotes, dude. You can't mess with the case that I make in Enough Already. You gotta admit. And it's gonna be the same way with Provoked.
Or call it Those Bastards, because that's what I uttered many times while reading Enough Already. Your chapter on Tora Bora, I remember just being like, those fucking bastards.
I mean, and this happens to me when I'm rereading my own books. It's the same thing for all of them, but including the current book I'm working on. I'll be in the middle of reading the thing that I already wrote, the quote from them that I already pasted in months ago or whatever, and I'm reading, I start cussing under my breath, and I get angry. It is exasperating. This is how I got people to read those previous books, basically, is these are collections of things that exasperate me. And so that's what keeps you turning the page, is you're going, Jesus Christ, dude, really? But then, yeah, really. And as you keep going, you see why, too. No, that makes sense, why they would do that absolutely unbelievable thing that they convinced themselves is the only sensible thing to do now after the less stupid, crazy thing that they shouldn't have done. And so that it is what it is. So if I really just, was plugging one thing so far, that's really what I spent the last 20 years on, is the Middle East. My Russia book, for whatever reason, is going to be 3 times as long. But enough already is what I really got to say, if people want to take a look at that.
All right. Well, you heard them, everyone. Pick up Enough Already. It is, you can find it, I guess we're really anywhere in audio form as well as paperback and electronic form. Hopefully I'm pitching that right. But Scott, thank you so much for giving us so much time today. It's been over 2.5 hours. It's always a pleasure. We could do another 2.5 hours easily, but I'll let you get back to your day and writing your book. And we'll hope to have you on again soon.
Hell yeah. Thank you, man, for having me very much. Henry and Danny, great to talk to you both. And listen, I don't know if I mentioned this, but everybody sign up for my podcast feed or follow my YouTube channel, because I got a big special thing I've been working on that's going to hit either tonight or tomorrow. In fact,
Oh, nice.
if you sign up for my Substack or my Patreon, you get every interview a day early. But everybody else, at least sign up at scotthorton.org or at YouTube or on your favorite podcatcher, because I got a big thing and you're going to like it.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, you heard it, man. Sign up.
All right. Thank you guys again.
Thanks, Scott.
Peace, everyone.